All right, we're going to reconvene in our budget deliberations. We're going back to item 3, new business, community organization presentation. Started off with the library. Welcome. You can pull a chair up there as well.
First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor and council for the opportunity to make this presentation. I know you've got some long meetings ahead, so I think we should go right into the PowerPoint presentation and make a couple of comments as we go through. And then if there are any questions.
Perfect, thank you.
I was gonna say, if you just want to let me know when to advance the slides, I can do that for you.
We don't really have anything to say about anything individual, but if anybody has any questions about each one, we can answer.
This PowerPoint is for information. It's to try to give everyone on council a better understanding of how busy the library is, what the library is doing, what are some of the policies of the library. This first slide is basically the mix of items that we have available in the library for our patrons. We go to the next, please.
Okay, we have a huge in-house collection in our library. Okay. There is a timer on each. Yeah, I did put them on a timer. So in-house, we have not only, I don't know, a lot of people assume libraries are just books. We have books, magazines, movies, audiobooks. We have games, puzzles. We loan out electronics and technology. There are a number of different types of readers. We service seniors and homebounds in their respective homes, seniors facilities in Wetaskiwin. We service Nels and Sela patrons who would be seeing and hearing disabled, or we have a numerous amount of learning items for people who are new learners or ESL learners, which is English as a second language learners. And then online, we have resources that are provided by our head system, which include, as you can see, e-audiobooks, magazines, e-resource collections, which include some are Ancestry, Auto Repair, Frontier Life. Pronunciator is a language learning software, and pretty much any software you look for that you have to buy, we have access for it, including software that people need for employment. They are able to access at the library for free. The next slide, I believe, is about our new Indigenous resource. On our website, we have one page that includes links to the community and resources that people need, but we decided to dedicate a full web page to Indigenous links because of we have many surrounding reserves, and there's links for language learning, children's resources, and everything online that are all in one place. This is our free little library, which was done through the Wetaskiwin Learning Community Programming. And it's for people who don't have access to library books.
Next slide, please. I think this slide, I'd like to just take a moment. We've, for your information, we've disclosed or want to inform you of the 2019 circulation. You'll see both virtual and non-virtual, about 130,000 items were accessed in 2019. Then along came March the 15th, 2020. And between the closures, the restrictions, that access to items dropped down to about 72,000, 73,000 items. In 2021, even though we still had restrictions, it increased to 83,000. And remember, during this time, a lot of it was curbside pickup. So they were restricted on how many could come into the library. But if you look at that, even in 2020, with 72,000, it's almost 6,000 items accessed every single month by people. And that increased in 2021. And in 2022, it's an estimate, we don't know. Who knows what the next variant's going to bring? Hopefully nothing, but we're hoping that we're going to at least be able to stay open. We're estimating almost 90,000 and start to get back to that 130,000. So if I could ask you to flip through to 2 more slides, please. Next. Thank you. As a result of these restrictions, you'll see in 2019, we had a total of 14 staff. In 2020, we had layoffs. 3 employees remained until the library added 2 more full-time and 3 more part-time later on. And of course, this all relates to COVID. In 2021, we began the year with a staff of 8 and ended with 5 full-time and 5 part-time. Still well below the 14. We're very conscious. Sorry, is that a question? My time up?
Oh, I was unmuted for a second.
Okay.
Hello. So what's your guys' opinions about new?
Is somebody asking a question?
Somebody's coming in from outside.
Oh, because I can't hear.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. In 2022, in the budget numbers, we're proposing a part-time addition to staff. And is that going to be enough? We're not sure, but we have to try to plan as best we can. And we think one part-time staff is going to be sufficient. Next slide, please. Into the programming. This is above my pay scale, so I won't talk anymore about programming.
Programming has been very difficult during COVID. Beginning tomorrow, our in-house programming begins for the first time in 2 years. People will actually be in the library. We are maintaining a virtual connection for immunocompromised families and people who are unable to come but still enjoy the programs. We did get a lot of, not a lot, but some new people who enjoyed our online story times and had never come to the library before. And we are hoping to make it possible for anybody who would like to partake of our programming to be able to do that. So we will continue the virtual programming.
And our next slides basically talk about some of the programs.
Yeah, we had some great programs.
Just,
You can search for our programs. They won't come up for just anybody. You have to use the links from our Facebook or from our webpage, because the story times can't be posted publicly as we don't own the rights. We just have the rights for use. So if you search for Wetaskiwin Public Library, you won't see all those videos, but if you want to take a look at them, all our virtual programming is listed on our webpage. There's a lot. Our escape rooms were a great hit. Even for me, I test drove each and every one, and one of our staff who created them, I think she's 20 years old. She stumped me several times with the simplest things. So they're a lot of fun. And we will continue those also.
just keep going with the slides.
Yep, next slide. Okay.
Again, they're all related.
Our book club, we actually started a book club. We've started several over the years, and they were never really a popular thing. But for some reason during COVID, people wanted to connect to the library and the library staff about new books. And so we started a Facebook book club. You can search for it. It's just Wetaskiwin Public Library Book Club. And we currently have 46 members, which is our most active membership in any book club ever, which is great. Oh, our story walk at By the Lake Park was in conjunction with a gracious donation from FCSS. And we posted pages of stories. We were given permission by the publisher. So you could walk through, I don't know if anybody did it, but you could walk through By the Lake Park, read the story as you go, and kids loved it. We had a lot of kids, we have a lot of kids who still come in and say, hey, you know, when is the next one? Our biggest problem was vandalism. And a lot of our signs were destroyed by vandals. I'm not sure why. They don't like education, maybe. So we're hoping to be able to replace some of those and have a new one up as soon as possible. And if you haven't checked it out, do it. It's awesome. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Interlibrary loans have pretty much remained the same. For anybody who doesn't know what an interlibrary loan is, we belong to a consortium of library systems, which includes Yellowhead, Marigold, Northern Lights, and Peace library system. And so anybody in those systems can search for a book that they would like to read. If their home library doesn't have it, or even their home system doesn't have it, they can get it from one of the other systems, and it's placed on hold. It is delivered in those blue bins to your library, and we check it in and you get your book, even though it came from hundreds of miles away. Because we were one of the few libraries who maintained curbside service almost throughout all of 2021 and almost all of 2020. We were one of the libraries first to start. And so our interlibrary loans stayed approximately the same from 2020 to 2021. Right now, we are only 2 months in. If we maintain, we will reach about 30 to 40,000 this year. So our library loans have definitely not let up. We're still doing a good job.
I guess I should have stated this at the beginning. Having lived in this community since 1989, I know quite a few people, but there's some I don't know. My name is Tim Bolivar. I am the chair of the library board. I apologize for that. Svea, I don't know if everybody knows you.
I'm Svea, I'm the quiet one, and I am the library manager. I've been at the library since I started at the library as a page in 2002. So I've been there about a millennia.
So we truly appreciate what you're going to end up going through here in the next few days, weeks, with this whole budget process. We think that we believe that we've been extremely careful in going through our budget. My background being in public accounting and as chairing finance and the members of finance, and their backgrounds, we were very conscious of the dollars and cents being spent, where they were being spent, and why they were being spent, considering the constraints that the city is under. We're all under. So the budget that we have presented to you, we feel very comfortable with. I hope you do as well. And thank you for your time in this presentation. If there are any questions, we'll attempt to answer them.
Thank you very much to both of you. Any questions? Councilor Billingsley?
Thank you. Question number one. How much cash, like not including gift in kind or services in kind, was given to the library in 2021?
Not including in kind?
Correct, just
Like
No.
how much money we're giving
correct, for operation.
other grant?
No, so in other words, how much money, not including the rental and of the facility, things like that, just dollar amounts that we have paid,
From the city?
correct?
504,388, I believe, was last year's amount.
Okay,
And this year, it looks like it will be 543.
I'd like to point out that wasn't money given, it was a requisition.
correct, yes, sorry. So 504 last year,
504.
looking for 543 this year.
Just let me give you the right one. You should have a copy of this template, and I believe the request is for 549,401, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And just for the rest of my colleagues at the table, I couldn't see it unless I missed it. Tim, you might be able to tell me exactly how much was put into reserves from unspent money from last year?
Do you have that one?
No, I don't have that with me.
From our fund?
It's in the financial statement. All of our surplus. I'm not sure if all members of council understand this or not, but under our latest agreement signed July 21st, July 2021, all surpluses are now restricted and goes into reserves for future capital expenditures, cannot be used for operating expenses to cover deficits.
140-ish?
I think it was 118.
Is that what it was?
I don't want to be quoted because it's wrong.
We are slightly over $200,000, I believe, in total reserves now accumulated on the books of the city. Once the
We don't know what the amount.
once the 2020 year has been closed out. I believe it's something like that.
And to follow up on that, then, can you explain to the rest of council of how that surplus occurred during 2021? Of what?
Well, that surplus is actually for 2020. We don't have 2021
yes.
numbers, right? For 2020, we were technically still considered a city department, and the city laid off everybody, pretty much anybody who wasn't needed absolutely in the building. And so we laid off all our staff except 3 full-time staff, which were held at, we worked at the library to maintain what we could, what library service we could. So all of that surplus is mainly from staffing. For 2021, there likely will be no surplus. I'm tried to keep our numbers. I'm really good at spending money and really good at getting a good deal. So I tried to stretch what we had and make sure there may be some small surplus, but I didn't go over in 2021, but that's what it was from 20.
And you don't believe that there would be any reason to have a surplus going forward in this requisition?
No.
Thank you.
Counselor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Svi and Tim, for the presentation. Just a few questions and or comments. First of all, library membership is free in Wetaskiwin, right?
Absolutely.
So nobody has to pay. How many patrons do we have altogether? How many total memberships?
I just finished our 2022 LibPass survey. That is a survey we do to get our grant funding from the province. And I believe the number was 6,000 members approximately. That number is, the numbers previously were done differently than they are done now. So active members, we have active memberships of approximately 6,200. And that is not just people from Wetaskiwin, it's Wetaskiwin City, the county, the surrounding reserves, and Indigenous communities, as well as me library patrons who are patrons who live elsewhere in Alberta in different systems and come to use our library. And that was an initiative created by the federal or provincial government so that you could have a library card in any town in Alberta and still go wherever you were and use a library.
So you can borrow or return books to any of those libraries.
Absolutely. So if you go on vacation to Grassland somewhere, you can use their library and yeah, everything you can do here at your home library.
Do you still go to Pasagasteo, the Healing Lodge at Masquachis?
We do not, they closed down to us immediately when COVID started. We were not even allowed to get our items back. And the lady who was looking after our interaction down there, she is no longer there. So I have been in contact with the new person and they have, they're trying to find our items. They have found a lot of them, a lot. We were kind of worried about them. There was about 175 items down there. I think we've recovered about 125 items. They didn't leave the building. They are in there somewhere because they're not allowed to take them out. And they do not know when we will be able to pick up our program again down there, but they will let us know. I mean, I am in contact with them, and so they will let us know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Nielsen.
Thank you, through the chair. To Tim. Tim, you mentioned that you thought there was about $200,000 in reserves and you made a statement that all reserves are restricted. So that full 200,000 is restricted to capital.
That's correct.
So there must be a plan, at least in some people's minds, about what the plan is with regard to restricted reserves. What would you share with council on that?
Quite simply, our library needs to get bigger. We have a tremendous amount of use. We have a very limited space in order to display the periodicals. The items, we literally, something comes in, something has to go out. Now, what does that mean? Well, from our perspective, there's absolutely nothing that we can do as an autonomous organization. This is all going to have to be done collectively with council, the city, province, whatever. When it will be done, I have no idea. But the last thing that we wanted was to create a surplus and get caught into this scenario of saying, well, we better spend our money from the prior year or we'll get cut back this year. That's not the way I've ever done business. I don't want to have that happen. I want to be responsible. I want to see us responsible for every single year on a standalone basis. So the way that we've structured it, literally, these funds, if it's a large capital that we probably even need to come to council to talk about it. Because it could be, for instance, computers and things like that, which council is involved with. But ideally, we see somewhere in the future, we think we need a larger library. And that's what we think should be done for in the future.
So as your board has those kinds of discussions or futuristic planning, are you talking, have you settled on an approach? I guess what I'm leading up to, are you talking about expanding current facilities? Or are you talking about potentially a new facility?
No comment. I have no idea.
Okay, and then as it relates to, and it goes back to the very first page, and I think you may have answered that. But it says here in terms of the library collection, when we buy an item, we must weed an item. And you're explaining that as a space requirement as opposed to any other kind of legal requirement. So at this point in time, our collection would not be growing at all.
The mix would be changing simply because we refresh with something new. But then there's also the virtual component that comes into play. Let's be a
We do try to create new ways to add space, but we're even running out of creative ways and creative places to put shelves and stuff. So we have a certain amount of bookshelves where we can put books on, but you're always supposed to have a certain amount of space left on your shelves because approximately 80% of your collection is only ever in the building. Our shelves looks like all of our collection is in the building all the time. They're always stuffed because we don't have any space to grow. So we get a lot of calls from people who want to know, hey, do you have the, phone books from 2001 and stuff like that. A lot of libraries do keep stuff like that. We absolutely do not. We don't have room. It is more important for us to have the latest books from the Mayo Clinic, breast cancer, or the latest windows for seniors, than it is to have things that may only be referenced, once every 2 years or something, right? So when we buy items in the children's collection, if we buy 200 items, we do have to weed 200 items. And those items are usually weeded first by condition. So if something is damaged or moldy or anything like that, those are recycled. And then what's left, if we can, if they're never new, I mean, we try to, go back at least 8 years to 10 years, say. Our collection, we have in the last year raised its age from approximately 15 years old to now about 10 years old. And a lot of libraries, their collection is much older because they have much more space and they can maintain, right?
I'd also like to point out in regards to space that from March 15th onward of 2020, we've had no boardroom because our boardroom was storing periodicals that had to be left for 72 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
restrictions.
All of our items have to be left. We have no.
Plus, we had to move all the chairs out so people couldn't sit. So, I mean, it is a juggling act, to be honest with you.
We don't have any extra storage, I think, what Tim is getting at. So when there was a time where you can't have people in the library as directed by the Public Librarian Service Council branch, they directed us not to have seating available, not to have people in the library. They could come in, get their items, and then, they could search for like 20 minutes. So we had to have all that stored, and we don't have any storage. We, a couple of years ago, bought a little shed. We do have, that is full. We can only buy so many sheds, and then they keep getting broken into, so we can't put anything valuable in there. So we use our meeting room and our children's craft room to store stuff. So we do have spaces, and we're getting things back out in the library now. People are coming in. So those rooms will be available, but other than our main branch of the library, we have 2 seating sections, which are rather small, 8 people or less, I would say. And then we have 2 small meeting rooms, which we can't hold a function with more than, say, 20 people. If it's not held in the main part of the library, anything over 20 has to be done in the main part of the library, which is where all our shelves are. So if you put in more shelves, then you don't have that space. So we've got to figure out which is more important.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, Tim, is can the library board be a charitable organization? Are you charitable?
We are.
No.
Through the city, we are.
No, a charitable organization, we have a friends group. Friends group is your charitable organization for a library.
So,
Because libraries,
but that was my point.
Yeah.
You can give tax receipts for donations
we do give tax receipts for donations. Yeah,
through the Friends of the Library.
yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
We are only an incorporated society, not a registered charity per se. So that's why the Friends.
So you can't give tax receipts?
Yes, we can through the Friends. But I'm saying.
Oh,
the
I got you.
actual,
Okay.
The incorporated entity is a society
Sorry,
only,
yeah, gotcha.
under
Thank you.
Societies Act.
Thank you.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. I won't belabor the point. Just our library is about 8,000 square feet. The library standards branch states that we should be somewhere between 16 and 20,000 square feet for the population that we have right now. So we are about half the size of what normal space should be according to library standards. Thank you.
May I just further to Council Nelson's question about, do we have any plans? I am a firm believer that we have to bring all the partners into discussions. That's why we're so, I won't say blessed, but we are encouraged by 2 members of council. I only say we're not blessed because of.
Oh, you didn't have to explain it. We understood.
But no, I mean, they're extremely involved and we truly appreciate it. I think that ultimately what will happen is that it's going to be all done as a partnership. Now, if we can go out and fundraise and get somebody or some people to donate whatever, $7 million, then we've got a nice approach to council, you know? But I do believe it's going to be a partner deal. It's because it is a city entity, if you will. You're the primary leaseholder with Zaleski, and so everything has to be done, in my opinion, if we're going to be successful as partners with the city. And we would never hold discussions if I'm chairing the board without the members of council represented on the board being involved.
Thank you.
We would never do that.
Thank you.
We would be.
Anything else? Thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're fortunate to have members from FCSS here to keep us going with a very insightful presentation coming up. Keep us engaged.
Is this on? Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Hoyle and I am the board chair to Wetaskiwin FCSS. And some of you may know Cheryl Friesen. She is the past board chair. So I'm going to let Cheryl speak to the last year first of all, and then I'll get into any questions and numbers.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to really quickly do a high-level overview of our 2021 year. Last year in March, we hired a new executive director. So we went through January, February, and half of March, running with 2 volunteers. During that time, there wasn't much for programming done, but what we did manage to do is to keep grants that we had coming in the door going forward. So we had an FCSS AA grant that was for food and necessities of life. We had a BIPOC grant, which was Black, Indigenous, People of Color grant that was for food for our Indigenous community, which was worth $50,000 that we had looked after and made sure that that community was looked after. And we had an increase to our FCSS AA grant as well, which was also for food. During the year, we did partner with the library with Salvation Army, neighborhood outreach of Wetaskiwin, the greenhouse one, sorry. Yes, thank you, Wayne. Rock Soup. And with the museum. So we did lots of partnering last year. For programming, we didn't have lots coming out. We are both here today because our ED is currently on a leave. That is how our year last year ran. We did end our year with not using all of our grant money, and we do work within prevention. However, we did do lots also with the homeless and the Homeless Coalition last year. Now we're ready for a new year and we're ready to move forward. And I'm going to let Wendy speak to that unless anybody has any questions regarding the year of 2021.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you pretty much all know how this works. We receive funding from the government Alberta and the city of Wetaskiwin as well. I think you were sent a very basic budget, again, because our ED has gone on leave. That's all we have, unfortunately. The numbers are there. So the numbers are that the government Alberta, their portion is, hold on, 337,163. The city's portion is 84,291, and that's based on an 80-20 funding program. The city, I understand, can give more if we request it, but at this point, we will not be requesting more. Right now, we have a staff of an ED to support staff, and we have also built in funding for a casual contract bookkeeper. That's something we're still looking at to move more of the finances into our own hands. Well, we do give out a community grant every year for $35,000. Programming is $48,000. Rent and premises upkeep. Oh, that was the other thing. We did move into a different facility last year. Rent and upkeep of the premises is $57,250. This next figure, I'm not sure on there. We were supposed to get some clarification and we haven't yet. Paul might be able to speak to that. We pay $18,000 to the city for payroll. Payroll still does, our city still does our payroll, and for finance that we run through the city. Staff development, $7,000. So, and then administration, phone, fax, internet, lawyer, audit fees, postage, advertising, and PR brings us to $27,170. And if we add those together, you'll see that we are at the $421,454, which is what our budget is for the year. Lots of good stuff moving forward. What isn't in this budget, one thing is Meals on Wheels, which I think was a concern last year. It has been run through FCSS on a daily delivery type basis. That is no longer feasible for several reasons: volunteers, cost of fuel, et cetera, et cetera. We have investigated thoroughly a new program, which we are going to get off the ground April 1st. It is a frozen meal program. It's out of Edmonton. Several other FCSSs use it with great success. We are able to still keep the costs down, which will be $7 a meal, which is really reasonable. The reason it's so good is it's dietary needs, which we aren't able to support right now. They can order more than just one meal. They can order two. They are picked up in Edmonton. They are brought to Wetaskiwin, and then in turn they're turned over and headed out to the clients. We haven't quite figured out if it's going to be weekly, twice a week, but that's how it's going to work. They have a list of 22, I think, meals they can pick from. And so, yeah, that's really exciting. We're happy to finally see that to come to fruition. And that is a recovery cost program. So that's about $32,000 a year, but it is in and out. We're hoping to run a seniors conference this year, a women's conference. We are partnering with CARIS. It's an Indigenous blanket exercising training program. We will actually take the training so that our office will actually do the exercise within the community between 4 to 6 times a year, as well as train other community members to do it as well. Katimavik is a volunteer program that's in our office right now. It's for young people in Canada that they engage in the community. They rotate out every 3 or 4 months. So we will have a Katimamik volunteer in the office all year except for July and August. And that's across Canada. We're doing a Lego club. Right now they do Lego club in school, but homeschooling does not have anything. So we're hoping to fill that gap. Jody Carrington, which we had to put on hold because of COVID, we're hoping to have her in September. And we had just finished a family day program and we have another one starting. I don't want to call it what it's called. A youth program for growing up, let's say, and it runs 8 weeks. It starts March 2nd. So lots of good stuff coming up. So I will take questions if anybody has any. Oh,
Councillor Nielsen.
Doing my math,
oh no.
and I could be off, but
It could
so
be.
if we're talking about $421,000 of revenue,
Mhm,
I see 229,000 in staffing,
mhm.
which leaves 192,000. And then if I take off some other items here, like there's $47,000 here for, can you find it now? Anyway, it left about $150,000. So is that normal from the perspective of the FCSS organization, where about a third of your assets go into programming?
If I'll just break these down for you, Wayne. So we've got 229,34 for wages.
Yep.
We have a community grant for 35,000. Programming is 48,000. Rent and premises is 57,250. 18,000 to the city for payroll and finance, which brings me to 394,284. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. And if we add our administration, our office administration, which included the phone, the fax, internet, lawyer, audit, postage, advertising, PR, is 27,170.
Okay, I buy those numbers.
Okay.
But if I look at the grants then, and programming of 48 and the grants of 35,
Mhm.
that would look like we're putting about $83,000 into programming in our community.
Exactly.
And so my question, and I don't need the answer now if you don't have one, but how would that measure up with other FCSS offices in relation to total revenue versus dollars going into program and benefiting the community? Like, if I'm looking at 80,000 on 420.
Right. So you're looking, and I understand totally, and I do not have those numbers. I don't know if that's ever been done. It's something that would be interested. What I can tell you is a lot of, like, if I take, for example, I can just pull out of my hat, Lacombe works on a budget of about $1 million. The difference is this also, we have the ability to apply for several grants. So they would just come in and go back out, which aren't accounted for here. So what you're saying is this office costs a lot versus what we're putting out the door for programming.
Correct.
Exactly. Right. And so what happens is these wages are divided equally. Like if you look at an FCSS, what they hand down to us, we have to divide them into programming. But he's saying as a whole, I agree. So no, I do not have those numbers off the top of my head, but it would be interesting to get them.
Wendy, you're saying that as the year progresses, you can apply for other grants that
Right.
pop up, and it becomes money in, money out that
Right.
isn't reflected here. And those grants typically would be related to programming.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Which is what Cheryl spoke to earlier about the food.
Yeah.
Those would have been that type of thing that came in and out last year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Aberley.
Thank you, Mayor Gandam, through the chair to FCSS. One of the things, and I think I was first going to start with one thing, but I think it's related to what Wayne was saying, is FCSS for me, has always been that part that's helped connect the agencies in town. And so having the monthly interagencies doing that when they started to come back, that was really great, that we can start to get together, know what everybody's doing. And that's also part of programming. So I would talk to the amount of time that the staff puts in to be a community service for other service groups is also not as easily seen in these numbers.
Yeah.
So that's I'm just speaking on for you and in behalf of that, because it really does add to.
It is
programming.
really hard to reflect what we do because there are so many, sometimes people just want to see the big stuff, but there's so many little things, like even doing stuff that really isn't in our mandate, but you can't, you get the person we talked about that came to the door last week and he was having some homeless issues and on and on. And so the staff actually spent, I think, about 3 hours with him, the two of them, to get his paperwork in order and stuff, because you can't just refuse them, right? We are a service and we need to provide that support. And so you don't see that in this, right? And so when you're in the office every day, you see those types of things happen. Like now we're running the tax program, which I didn't mention is a very big program that starts tomorrow. They spend a lot of time just in taking paperwork and out the door, right? So again, those support of those preventative type programs. So you're very right. Thank you for that.
That covers you, Councillor Eberly.
That was everything. Sorry.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. First of all, Cheryl and Wendy, thank you very much for the presentation. And because of the ED being gone, I can't thank you enough for all the time and effort you put in over the last few weeks. I know many hours have been put in, so thank you for that work. My question actually is, I don't know if this is going to be an administration question or to FCSS, but is the provincial government's amount, is that based on population or is that based upon the amount that we're willing to put into it?
It is based on population. It's not just population because of course the county has their own too, right? And I believe Millet as well. And so we kind of cross over again. We would never refuse a county resident if they came to our office, right? So yes, it is predominantly based, but I think there's some other stuff in there as well.
So their calculation is based upon like who
The
comes
80-20 is across the province. It doesn't matter all FCSS unless the city, my understanding is they can give more, but it is an 80-20 divide.
So if we gave $5 million, they would put in,
They would still put in what they put in, which is.
but
the
nothing
80.
more,
No,
nothing more than
no,
the
no.
337.
That's right. We could come to the city for more if we felt we needed it, but not to the GOA.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, ladies, for the presentation. I'm excited about what you were saying about this frozen food program. Who would have access to this program?
Right now, we're going to roll it out to the seniors because that's predominantly who we should. But we also felt going down the road, once we get it up and running smoothly, we're looking at people that are recovering perhaps from something. We just think we can go anywhere with it. So that was the other reason. It didn't have to be a 1 meal a day and you have to be a senior. It could be the mom that their child is going through cancer treatments and she just cannot cook a decent meal every day, on and on. So that was what we kind of looked at branching out into as we go forward. But right now we'll just look at serving who we are serving till we get all the kinks worked out.
But this would be advertised, Wendy?
Yes, absolutely.
And I wasn't clear on how it's going to be distributed.
So what's going to happen is, and the company is out of Edmonton and they supply many Meals on Wheels to different programs. So somebody would go on let's say we're going to say Thursday, because that's just what I'm throwing out there. So first thing Thursday morning, they head off to Edmonton, they get all the frozen meals, which the clients have ordered. They have an order form, they will order it, comes back to the office. Those foods are sorted into bags, bins, whatever you want to call them, and they go right back out. We built in contingencies. For example, we'll have to have a freezer because those meals, someone might not be home, there's all those things. And that will happen once a week. At this point, we'll go pick them up. We're hoping to move to a 2-week demographic to pick them up, but the clients will be 1 a week delivery. So if they want to order 10 meals representing lunch and dinner, they're welcome. Right now, they're only allowed 1. That's it. They can order 1 meal a day and, right, correct? Can they order 2? I don't think so.
We deliver 2 to some homes.
Yeah, but there's no choice. There's no dietary, if you
Right.
have a dietary need, they don't support it in any way, shape or form.
So they can pick up their meals or they will be delivered.
They will be delivered or picked up. Right now, I would think delivered because most of them are, so.
We deliver them through volunteers.
Right.
Right. No, I did. Yes. Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's another problem we are having, and I think I hear that across the board. There is a problem with procuring volunteers right now. I think COVID has really hit volunteerism hard in the city. And so we never had gaps in our delivery before, but we're finding large gaps. So that takes care of it. We're only delivering once a week versus 5 days a week.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you. A presentation was made by FCSS earlier this year with regard to their budget and concern about it being underspent and what the implications would be. And Paul was going to be doing some work, I think, with FCSS to determine whether we're going to lose future dollars. I'm assuming that the 337,163 is your anticipated portion.
Current.
Is that anticipated portion in jeopardy because of unspent funds in the past year?
So we had quite a large surplus in 2020, which we have addressed. I think that's probably what you saw at council, and some proposals were brought forward, which some of them are moving forward with. Some of them were not able to because of mandating, and they did not fit in our mandate. There's a couple ways it could go. We could lose funding if we don't spend it. That is definite. FCSS has said there is a way that we can just say we can't spend this money, which is happening across the province. We're not unique to this because of COVID. And that would, there's a word for it and they used it. I've never heard it before, but then that funding would just be negated for that year, but we wouldn't lose it going forward. So 2020, and again, I think Paul's working on this because it did change a bit, and we will have a surplus for 21, but not as large. We just don't know what it is yet. So
there will be a surplus, and that surplus would be added potentially to the 337.
correct. We would have to submit programming for this to the city for the city to ask the government to use that funding for that program. Because the agreement is between the city of Wetaskiwin and the government, not us.
Right.
Our
Because
agreement.
as I recall, the concern was if we didn't spend it, it would come off of this year's to
Right.
add up to whatever the allocation would be.
And we brought that concern to FCSS, and they said there is a way around it, which they would work with us to do. So we do not lose that funding going forward.
Thank you.
Paul.
Hi, city administration does have a meeting with the government of Alberta FCSS next Monday to get a better understanding exactly of how these surpluses will be impacting the FCS grant moving forward, and we will update council once we know more.
Thank you, Paul.
Anything further? Anything you two would like to add?
Nope, thank you.
Forever hold your peace.
Forever. Thanks.
Not likely. Thank you both very much. Did you have something? Dr. Durant, you're up. Straight up. We're going to go old school here. I'm here to ask for a total ask of $114,300 for renovations to the current city RCMP detachment. These monies will be spent in upgrading and expanding our investigative capacity space in the basement. As council is aware, we had an increase in membership to our detachment of 10 members this last year, 6 being provincial members and 4 being added to the municipal side as part of a grant paid for by the province. As you're aware, the provincial members or the members that are supplied by the province and work out of our office, the city building, pay rent back to the city with regards to that. You guys receive money back from the province for the members that are actually working within the detachment. As a result of that and the increase in the 10 members to the detachment, I've done a little bit of math on that. So the total recovery of costs from the provincial government for the 6 members that are coming in, the new members that are arriving. And what I've done is I've split the 10, the 4 that are on the municipal side, and then the 6 being provincial members coming in. Now, I couldn't get an actual dollar value per member per year, so I had to do some extrapolation. So the city receives $204,000 a year, and I divided that by the number of provincial members I had in the detachment of 22. This includes the 12 provincial members that we have, plus the 10 members that are on the integrated highway patrol unit, which is both RCMP and sheriffs. And if my Gilligan math is correct, that works out to $92.72 per member annually. Now, if you take the $92.72 and you times that by 6 new positions that are coming in, so that was the base. Now we're going to talk about the new members coming in. The provincial members, it's a total of $55,632 per year over the 3 years of the additional members coming in. So it was on a 3-year program, the 10 members coming to our detachment, for a total of $166,896. That's the total amount that the city will be recovering from the province for the additional 6 members coming into the detachment over the next 3 years. So if my math is correct, that is a net profit at the end of the 3 years of $52,596 to complete the $114,300 renovation. As part of the renovations, the downstairs classroom that we have, or large meeting room, has a small space. As you come into the room, that's more or less useless space. It's almost about 225 square feet-ish. 200 square feet, that little kitchen area there. Anyway, it's about that. About 25. So that's actually useless space and it's not being utilized. So our plan moving forward, if the funds come available, is we're going to utilize that space, take the meeting room, take 13 feet out of the gymnasium, make it into one large room. There'll be 3 offices, standalone offices put down there. That'll house the new staff sergeant position and both supervisors of the corporal of the crew team and the corporal of the general investigation section. All of our investigative sections will then be in one place downstairs. Also, the analyst will be down there and 2 support staff. This will alleviate the pressures on the upstairs portion of the building where we're literally bursting at the seams. And we're having 4 more general duty members coming in on the municipal side. Our plan then is all the members that are in the crime reduction unit that is in the old filing room will then go downstairs. This will alleviate a space for the bylaw unit to move into that space and will then make us more space on the floor inside the main bullpen area for the general duty members. That's our plan. If this doesn't go ahead, then we're going to have to look at other options as far as moving people around, meaning either we have to find a new home for bylaw, which I don't want to do. I want to keep everybody together under one roof. Or we have to perhaps look at moving the highway patrol unit out of the building. And that's a lost revenue to the city of about $92,000 a year if we move the highway patrol out to make room for all the additional members coming in. You want to talk about any questions on that? Questions on that part? Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you. I guess I have 2 questions here, Keith.
Okay.
The first question is related to, we really have about a $90,000 project, demolition of walls, so on, sprinkler design. And we have a engineering cost of $25,000. I'm having trouble understanding why a $90,000 project would require a 22% cost of engineering.
So I can speak to that one. We brought in Associated Engineering to have a look at this because we wanted to make sure the project was done properly. At the time, we didn't have a manager of engineering, which we currently have right now. And myself, in our department, we've actually got Amanda back who can actually do drawings. So we don't have to outsource that anymore. We could actually do that in-house. So we could potentially take the 25.3 out of there and make this project 89,000. But because back when we did this plan, we didn't have those resources available. And that's what, basically, that's the number that Associated Engineering came back to us with.
Okay, so for clarification,
Yep.
we have not expended any funds yet. Associated Engineering is saying that what it'll cost you. You're saying we have the capacity to do that in-house.
I believe we do, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My next question, Keith, is what happens with regard to now you've created these new spaces for the new staff? Who bears the cost of desks, chairs, technology?
There's through property management, the capital cost to the building itself is a city responsibility. Any infrastructure, desks, chairs, IT, that kind of stuff is all on the RCMP to manage that piece. There might be some costs with relation to IT lines and that kind of stuff, but most of the stuff's wireless now, so that's a moot point. But data drops, extra power, that kind of stuff would be part of that cost. But all the other furniture and that kind of stuff would be the responsibility of the RCMP.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Everly.
Thank you, Mayor Gandon, through the chair to Inspector, right? Grant?
Inspector me, yep.
Humor me, please, and tell me the requirements for the 4 walls. Right,
Requirements.
so why we're not looking at a open concept, I understand tearing it down and I understand those things, but as I look beyond the 3 years, I'd like to know why in 3 years separate offices are required and then where it would go 3 years from now.
Okay. It will be an open concept, except for the 3 small offices in that space for the supervisors.
Yeah.
The supervisors at that rank and also in relation to the number of employees that they have to, there's times when they need office space to have private conversations with other employees or private conversations as their own. So based on what we have now, the corporals are kind of putting up with the fact of working, they have to go find another place to have a private conversation with one of their members or something to that effect. So the 3 small offices down, and they're only going to be 9 by 9.
8 by 10.
Sorry, 8 by 10. Will be along one wall, and the rest will be a completely open concept for all the constables, support staff, and everything else.
Thank you. And then how do you see that working 3 years from now? How would you reuse that space, or will there be, right, once this beauty and everything works and we no longer need the 10 extra officers?
That portion of the room, it puts all our investigative pieces into one space. Right now, the current team has been working out of a file room, which we just put some small desks and a large table and that sort of stuff. It's not conducive to proper work. Again, that team does a lot of their work on the road too, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. But that being said, that space should remain in place and you shouldn't have to expand that space again. We have, and this is something that we were considering in this, was to try and keep the cost to a minimum because it's a 3-year plan. The other piece is looking out 5-10 years. The detachment, I understand, was built so that it could go west into that green space between the church and the west side of the detachment. It's all wired to expand to go out that way. That was another option we looked at, but just way too much time. We need to get these folks properly settled in the detachment so that we can have space for them to work properly. And I wanted to keep bylaw in the building as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 questions. First one would, guess will be to administration on this engineering. I too had concerns about close to 25% being spent on engineering. You stated that now we could do this in-house because we're the people. What I don't understand is, I'm going to guess the people in-house aren't architects or mechanical engineers. Why would we then have not gone to that level of people, non-engineers, non-architects, when we were outsourcing it? Why would we go, if it's okay now to use non-engineers and non-architects, why didn't we do that before? Because that's a ridiculous amount of money.
It is, it is high. But basically what we were looking there was design, putting it to tender, making the award, project management as well, because of the short staff that we were at the time. But looking at it now, we've got an opportunity here where we can do it internal. We do have a new manager of engineering in place. We've got one of our drafts people, GIS people back, so we can actually do a drawing. And we can rely on relationships that we've got with mechanical when we come to just some specific questions on the mechanical, that we can just basically use them for that small amount of information that we require.
I think further to that too, Councillor Billingsley, we do have an engineer on staff, and we also have an architectural technologist on staff. Those are the staff that have been available now for this. And the other piece to this is permits would have to be pulled, and we can rely on the safety codes professionals to tell us what needs to be done after our architectural technologist does up the drawings.
Okay, thank you. Help me understand the lease that the RCMP has with the city, or the agreement, because you talked about, so you pay based, or we collect, I guess I'm going to look at it, based upon how many members. So if you only had one member here, you would pay substantially less than if you had 38. Is that fair? By the math you talked about, the $9,272.
I'm sorry, Mr. Billingsley, my knowledge of the lease agreement between the city and the province is limited, but it's a per provincial member. We don't, the RCMP does not, or the city does not get, or sorry, the RCMP does not bill back for provincial support staff, for example. They just put it on the number of cops in the building, and then the number of those that are on the provincial side of the house. And then then they send the bill. The city is to bill back to the province for that amount of money. And it's a flat rate. And I couldn't get the actual per member. I had to work backwards from the amount of the bill that was shown and the number of provincial chairs that we had in the office, and work backwards. Did I answer your question?
Well, I'm just trying to understand.
Paul might have an answer for that.
Through the mayor, Councillor Billingsley, in the line item in the budget, in the revenues under the RCMP cost center, we do have a monthly/yearly rentals for that lease revenue. It's currently budgeted at $210,400. That's based off of the previous to the new 6 Met provincial members that will be coming into the detachment. And so both Diana and I have reached out to the leasing group within the RCMP to get a better sense of how much of an increase will we see with these 6 new provincial members coming into the building. Unfortunately, we have to do a little bit of work with them to reconcile the building costs, which drives the overall lease revenue. And so we've been going back a few years to work with them to ensure that the building has been reconciled properly. And once they are ready, they will have more information to us in regards to specifically how much that lease revenue will increase. However, at this point in time, we don't have any hard numbers on that. At this point, the estimates that Inspector Durance is bringing to you are based off of his estimates, and we have yet to hear any hard numbers from the RCMP.
So that would be calculated on a average throughout the year, I'm going to guess, because obviously members come and go throughout the year, how many positions you're able to fill, right?
Yes. When we look at the what we call the FTE burn, there's a full report that comes to me monthly. The city only, for example, the city only pays for the number of positions that are actually in place. If we're running 4 members short, then the city is not billed for those 4 members, right? Likewise, if the provincial side is 2 or 3 members short, then the amount coming back to the city would be less.
Okay, questions answered. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the inspector. Keith, just with your expansion, you have exercise facilities downstairs.
Yeah.
Will any of that be lost?
Yes, we're going to lose about 13 feet out of that gymnasium
That's that expansion you're talking
Yeah.
about.
We're just gonna, if you come into the room, there's a kind of a wasted space and then it goes down into the corner. And if you've been in that room,
Yes.
we're just gonna take that room, that wall and pull it right back and it'll be take about 13 feet out of the gymnasium.
So they'll still have enough room
Yep.
though.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a huge gym for a
Mhm.
detachment of our size. So
It is.
that's where we decided we could probably gain some space.
Okay. The other thing is, I was just wondering, in 2017, it was about we were told it was about $180,000 per member per year, all in. So that was the cars, the, uniforms, all of that.
Yep.
Does the province rebate us for all of those costs or just for wages?
The full pro rata share per member, the city pays 70% of that.
Yes.
30% is paid for by the feds.
Yes.
Okay. So the new pro rata rate is 134,612, and that's the 70% that the city pays.
Okay.
What you pay in goes into you, like you said, cars, paper, support staff, infrastructure, IT, gas, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So it all goes all in.
But
Did that answer the
yeah,
question?
well, yes,
Yeah.
but when we're getting quote unquote rebated,
Right.
that's not taken into consideration, or it is?
No, it's done afterwards. So you pay the 70% of that's what's billed to the city. And through the number of provincial people that are in the building per month, it's
That
you
comes
bill that back from the city. So you pay all in and then you get money back.
Okay. Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, the city receives provincial policing grant of $501,240 to help offset our RCMP policing costs annually.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Lonsdale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Keith. Keith, you had stated your hopefulness of keeping bylaw underneath the same roof. And I think that's the best way to go about it as well. But how confident are you with these renovations that will happen?
Oh, I think we can definitely make that happen if we get these expansions, because what we're doing is we're actually moving the entire crew unit downstairs, and which will open up that office space to move the entire bylaw unit into that space, which then opens up the real estate in the main bullpen for the other general duty members that are coming, that are already here.
Perfect. No, that's, thank you, because I just didn't really want to have to go out and try to find a new home for bylaw, so. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And not just that, not just the cost to that, of having to find a new home for bylaw, it doesn't make any sense on the policing side of things. I mean, there's been a great partnership between bylaw and us since they've moved back into the building. And, if I have an issue, and a lot of times Paul's looking for information, and he's looking for information from both me and the sergeant in bylaw. So we get to put our heads together and say, well, do you want to answer to Paul, or do you want me to, right? So it's quite a good working relationship, not to mention just all the intelligence and the information that's shared back and forth within the investigations.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything further? Thank you very much for your
Just-
time. and
Could I
thanks for-
just ask one?
Thanks for your
Sorry,
patience. Sure, Councillor Elliott.
it's not totally related to the budget, but it's related to the peace officers there.
Okay.
I tried to phone peace officers last week.
Okay.
And I got sent through to a dispatcher.
Mhm.
So our CPOs are on dispatch, just like the RCMP members are.
Yes, they are.
So we don't have a hired City of Wetaskiwin staff answering the phone.
Depends which number the person calls.
Okay. But if I try to get a hold of one, then it's going through dispatch.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nielsen.
Pursue that a little bit. You're saying depending which number you call. So I could get through to our CPOs directly.
During the day, while we're open, you call the admin line and you ask for the CPO, you're going to get Heather at the CPO desk, or you'd get Trent.
Okay, thank you.
Now, that being said, they may say, what would you like to, I make a bylaw complaint? Well, they may forward that on to the dispatching folks. Okay. Okay, you call the 4401 number? Okay. 7267 is that's our complaint line. Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Three C 2022 capital budget.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, could we
Oh, right.
talk about the grant and
Yes,
aid real quick
please.
for clarification?
Yeah.
So in the past administration, whatever was not approved, it was actually removed from the budget. Is it council's desire to have that removed from the budget and then reinstated next year or keep it in?
Karen, can you bring up the spreadsheet?
No to what?
I was just answering your question.
I hadn't asked a question yet. How do you know I'm going to word it?
Yes, it is. In the 2022 budget folder, and it should be the grant and aid application. Okay. There it is. Okay, your worship, just to confirm the discussions this morning from the grant and aid applications. What we've done is we've basically shown the amount of the request for 2022 and council's approval. So I want to just confirm council's approval. And just as an overview, the total grant in aid applications amounted to 136,600. We had 93,600 in the budget, so there would have been if council had granted the full amount, we would have had a $43,000 addition to the budget. However, based on council's approval, the total for the grant in lieu are $88,720. From the 93,600 will leave us with a reduction in the overall budget requirement of 4,880. Now, those grant in aid applications include 15,000 to the Wetaskiwin Theatre Society, 1,100 to the Quilting Divas, 50,000 to the Wetaskiwin and District Museum, Society. The Reynolds Alberta Museum is 0. And this is the one that I wanted clarification because there was some discussion about this being an advertising component. But my understanding was that there was not going to be anything granted and that economic development would determine whether or not they would be in support of any advertising assistance to the museum. Is that correct?
That was to the raceway, not the museum. Oh, sorry, museum as well, but the raceway. It would be up to them to prioritize their current budget.
Right.
Without adding what we've taken away from this.
Okay. Then we have the Edmonton International Raceway for 2,000 in kind or up to 2,000 in kind. The Wetaskiwin Air Services 20. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think
That was the Wetaskiwin Music Festival
Yeah.
Association, the 2,000 in kind. Thanks, Karen. I can't do anything over here. The Edmonton International Raceway for 5,000. Wetaskiwin Air Services Limited for 2,500. The Wetaskiwin Ag Society 7620 in kind. Prism Wetaskiwin 3,000. Wetaskiwin Legion, my spelling's bad, 500. Manalik Theatre Society 500. Horizon Center 500. Wetaskiwin Olympian Swim Society 500. North Central Alberta Poultry Association 0. And the Wetaskiwin Art Music Festival Society of 500.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So does council want to leave that 4880 in that budget, take it out? Or reallocate it someplace else? Let's go simply, do we leave it where it is and it becomes then a surplus for the rest of the year?
In the past, it has been removed.
Removed?
Yes.
Okay. Correct. Yeah. Removing it. Okay, got it.
Sorry.
Perfect. It
Okay,
is removed.
done. Thank you.
I don't know how you guys can, or how you're getting confused, because I'm confusing myself, so. Yeah. I assure you, we will not be here at 8 o'clock. Not even tomorrow morning. Okay, now 3C, capital budget.
Right. Your worship and members of council, administration is bringing forward a capital budget for council's approval. As indicated just recently, we'll have an adjustment to the numbers that have been provided by taking out $25,000 of engineering and architectural costs, so that the project for the renovations to the RCMP building will now be $89,300, correct, Ches?
Yes, it is.
Okay. The funding source would not change, so we were looking at funding that from the MSI grant, so essentially that won't change. So overall, the adjusted capital budget is now $5,189,700, of which $4,550,000 and $600 is funded from grants. $84,700 is being funded from the infrastructure tax reserve, and $554,400 is funded through local improvement for the roadway project. And essentially, there are business cases or capital charters for each of the projects, and any questions relating to any specific charter can be addressed to the gallery.
Okay, so first one in that then, will we start on page 6 then, Sue, for the AFRAC radios?
Yeah, each department head will speak to theirs or have their staff here.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, council. 2022 capital project charter ask from both bylaw enforcement as well as Wetaskiwin Fire Services is for purchase of some AFRAX radios. Purpose of this capital charter is to replace the existing and aging communication systems with both the fire and enforcement services. Essentially, the existing radio technology is end of life and is not reliable for our bylaw and fire services staff. So we are putting a request in for AFRAX radios, total budget of $223,000. If there are any questions, we can take those now. I do have CPO Sergeant Yeager as well as Deputy Chief Alex Plant as well to help with those questions.
Perfect. Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you, your worship. Maybe I just need to understand a little bit here. I'm on page 10 of 60 on cost estimates. And it talks about 38 AFRAX portables. So does every volunteer firefighter carry on their person all the time, their radio?
Deputy Chief.
Okay, to answer that, no. The thought right now is we're going to currently do what we do now, where the radio stays in station, and the fire department firefighters are alerted by a pager that they carry on their hip. It's a lot more cost effective that way. If something becomes damaged or gets lost, it's a lot less dollar value as opposed to losing a radio, which is critical to firefighting.
Every member has a radio. It's just at the station.
Yes.
Regular firefighters will have their radios in a station. Duty officer will carry the radio with them.
So there's no such thing as sharing a radio?
No.
Why would that be?
What are you going to do at a big fire when everybody shows up to put out the fire? We can't share radios then.
I don't know, because I don't know the process.
Yeah, the process is currently right now, everybody has a radio that sits on top of their locker. So where all their fire gear is, their jackets, their pants, their boots, their helmets, there's a pager that sits there in a charging stand too. So as soon as the call comes in, they come in, they'll grab their gear, grab their radio and hop on a truck. That means we have safety first and foremost for anybody on the fire scene.
Okay, thank you. My next question is related to
just before you move on, Sergeant Yeager.
No, and that's what I was just speaking to, the same thing. It's the reason every firefighter has a radio in this project was like basically seats on trucks. And that was more the OH&S component that every officer needs to have a radio on scene for safety.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Same thing on the emergency control center. We're talking about 8 different units. Why are we talking about 8? How did that number get arrived at?
Through the mayor, Councillor Nielsen. Trent, I think Trent can maybe speak to a bit of this. He worked with Chief Wilkinson when we initially drafted this back in July or August, but my understanding is the 8 would be for when an emergency operations center is kind of fully active. We have 8 radios to support its operation.
So yeah, so I worked with Jamie on this. This actually asked for the emergency control center, came out of the water treatment plant concern. They had no ability to contact various other organizations actually helping with that. So with AFRAX, there is a common channel that's given to every AFRAX radio in the entire county of Wetaskiwin. So that's automatic when we do switch over to AFRAX. And so that's the reason of having that many radios so that we can actually hand them out and you can have various contact with various other agencies on that channel.
Thank you. My next question is related to trade-in errors. If in fact, every one of our volunteer firefighters has to have a radio currently, why would we have trouble being able to provide the required amount of 43 trade-ins?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen. Trent, can you please speak to that?
Yeah, so for that one there, we have to have a working radio. Originally, we thought that through this budget refresh that the radio didn't have to work. Through communication, they do have kind of a refresh radio program to hand out to other departments down the road. So every radio that we hand in has to work. So I've just accounted for that if we don't have all functioning radios, that I've built in a little bit of a contingency that way if we have to purchase them, that's what that's for, is if we have to purchase a couple more radios. So I worked it out to be about 4 out of that big ask of 53 radios.
Okay, so I'm being informed that everyone needs to have a working radio to meet OH&S standards, but we have a number of radios that won't meet those standards that our officers are carrying.
That, like right now, yeah, I actually have one that's completely down. I'm soon might be having 2 here for my staff that through this project is now stopped working.
Councillor Nielsen, if we have 30 active members or 34 active members, there would be spare radios. So those 30 or 33, every member would have a working radio. The spares or ones that are being used for parts might not be working or taken on trade-in. That's where you get the 43 as opposed to the number that we have for active members who have working radios.
Okay, thank you. My last question is related to a contingency of $10,620. So if the project pre-contingency was 212 and the final bill is at 223, that would suggest we have a contingency of 10,620. Why would we need a contingency? Do we not know how much each of these radios are going to cost us?
So with this, yeah, I did a preliminary, but unfortunately due to COVID, and especially the microchip world of being shortages, costs are continuously rising. So every time we get an update on pricing, it does go up. So these are all coming out of the US, in which we have no control on pricing.
Thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Actually, my question had to do with the trade-ins and as well as the contingency. Then I'll follow up on the contingency. When was the last time a quote was obtained on this gear and when does that expire?
So the last estimate I got on this was just about October. We had some additions based on emergency management, some other questions. So this is probably about 3 months old and they're good for 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nielsen.
Through the chair to Sue. This sounds really snotty. I don't mean to sound this way. Why am I looking at budget numbers that have been procured in October when we're looking at a budget in February?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, that's actually a really tight timeline. Most organizations were a year out. We kind of refreshed everything in the fall before we submitted it, but most times we're working with information that's at least a year old. We don't have the time to sit there and update costs in real time. And I think given the current state of the world and supply chain issues that we're having, contingencies are a very smart investment right now. Of course, administration will do our best to not spend those contingencies, but knowing that they're there could help us with the challenges that we have right now.
Covers you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Deputy Chief or Sergeant, how many other paid on-call departments have switched to the AFRAC system or have a full complement of radios for their members?
I can speak to that here. I just looked it up here over the lunch hour, and there are approximately 20 to 24 part-time on-call fire departments that do have AFRAX radio systems.
Full systems for all of their members or just for?
They are either fully manned up or they're in the conversion phase right now, but they do actively have AFRAX on the ground in one fashion or another.
And will we then have the ability to communicate with RCMP and EMS on scenes, or is it just increased communications on scene for the fire department or the members that are on scene?
For the fire service, it's just increased communication among ourselves and our dispatch agency. We do not at this time have the ability to communicate with RCMP. We do have the ability to communicate with bylaw though.
I can just add to that. So I can tell you that Millet, not so much on their fire side, but when their CPO transitioned over to AFRAX, request went out to EMS. So he does have all the EMS working channels for the immediate area. He was given approval to have that. So he does have communication with EMS. As far as the RCMP goes, because it is a fully encrypted system, our CPOs went through a pilot project in 2020. We did get approval from the RCMP. We have to go through an extensive security clearance process to get access. So none of the fire departments I know of in all of Alberta yet has decided to do a pilot project to get that access to the RCMP channel directly.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if this is an ongoing cost, would we be better off to put some money away each year? Just like we do with the fire truck and things to offset this cost, so they're not coming in with a total cost this high? Or is this just going to screw up budgets if we're trying to do replacement costs all the time?
I think you would need to do both. If you were going to phase it in, you would start putting money away to purchase those radios, but then also in perpetuity having that as a budget line item for replacement of equipment, regardless of it being a fire truck or radios or gear.
Well, no, we're going to buy them outright as the proposal.
Yeah.
But then I'm suggesting that
Yes.
starting next year.
Start putting money away for
Yes.
replacement. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Has it been looked at to possibly just, since these radios at the beginning at least will not talk to our CMP, and it's just going to be in our communication with the department, was any consideration given to replace and or fix or increase the existing radio system that they're currently using?
So I have looked into that. One of the issues we're having is it's just failing. I have been in since May of last year without our 1033. So that's our emergency button that goes to our dispatch that we can push. And like we're talking, officer needs assistant now. That has been on non-functional for almost 6 months. With this upgrade, we basically take all that infrastructure cost off the city and all of that goes onto the province. So that's something that should be noted here.
Help me understand the technology a little bit. So Trent, you say that you push a button that fails, but that would be the equipment that we have is failing?
Yeah, then we're responsible for fixing that. Whereas with AFRAX, I know it's a large ask because we're doing it kind of all at once. But going forward, all of the infrastructure repair and maintenance falls on the Alberta government because it's their radio system. That being said, we're also getting away from radio technology. So from my limited capacity in discussions with the government and various vendors, is we're now moving into a cell phone based system, which is obviously less power and we can spread it out farther. So like as my previous presentation last year, operational off the current tower that we have in Wetaskiwin, I can get as far as Didsbury with no disruption of service and go as far as North Edmonton. And then when we do have disruption of service, the nice thing about this AFRAC system is it goes off in an excruciating, irritating tone to actually let everybody know that you are now non-operational on that radio.
Okay, so what would it cost, or was a cost obtained to fix the button and to do all the, replace the radios that aren't working? Was that a quote or any of that investigated?
We haven't done a total investigation. I can give you a ballpark. It's like we would need new repeaters at like 20 to 30,000 just for the repeater alone, never mind the wages for, and then also be looking at relocation of installing a tower. The water tower isn't the most best location now for a repeater. They've noted that because of the condensation and stuff from the water. So then we'd be looking at actual infrastructure of towers and stuff like that. So we didn't go fully into it, but we can investigate it if so choose, but it would be a very large cost, I'm assuming, with a tower install.
Thank you.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you, sir. Through the chair to, I'm not exactly sure, but have we looked into what a warranty would be for a new system?
I have done some warranties. They'll go to about 5 years, and then it's usually about $500 a radio. But I can, again, I haven't done the current cost of what a warranty would be for our radios.
Okay, thank you, Trent. My last question is, considering we've got a three-month-old quote, and as I know, that's not that old, but it only being good for 30 days. If something happens and this is approved today, and we get a quote back that is, say, much higher than our 5% contingency, does it come back to us then, Sue, at that point in time?
The Mayor to Councillor Lonsdale. So if we went out ahead and to try to tender this and we did not have the funding, we would have to come back to council for those funds. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sergeant or Deputy Chief, is the EFRAC system compatible with our current system? Can one radio talk to the other radio?
So, yeah, so I guess with our current system, there is some new technology that came out. If you look in the project there, I have a special UHF, VHF link to AFRACs. That technology wasn't around last year. It's now since been developed by one of the vendors, and that would have the ability to take a mobile radio, an AFRAC's mobile radio, and we can actually link the VHF into our AFRACs channel. But it's only a temporary, it's not designed to be used all the time. But if we go onto an MVC and we have an agency that's not quite up to, like they're still on the VHF old system, we can flick this switch to give them temporary access. But we have been advised by both the government and the vendor that this is not a large scale usage for this. This is just kind of a minor incident where we need all to come together.
What would it look like if we phase this in? So bylaw services, having the radios for that, getting radios for our command trucks, and then possibly a few radios or radios for each of the trucks that are responding. And then a couple of radios for the emergency control center. How does that work operationally for the CPOs, for fire, and for the EOC? To have those in place now and then phasing them in for each of the members moving forward?
It is a possibility. Great question. Mayor, is, yeah, we can definitely do that. The only thing you have to be cognizant of is there will be some extra costs as far as maintaining the current fire system, just so that it's because we'll have to operate both VHF and AFRACs.
That's at 2525.
Well, that's the link. So if we phase in, so because the other department will have to run a VHF on its own, so you're going to operate that current system with the repeater that's up there. So if the repeater goes down or any of the boxes that we have, there'll be expenses for that, because we still have to operate that VHF system, and then we can slowly phase them in and then phase out that VHF system altogether.
And you were talking about with the tower and the cost with that, is that for improving our current system, or is that for if we switch to an AFRAC system?
That would only be to improve your current system. If we switch out to an AFRAX, those towers are all out there already.
And you're speaking to the condensation in the water tower?
Yeah, there's some, just because the water and the electronics, right? Water and power don't mix, so they were looking at relocating it to a different location if we keep the current system.
Is I don't know what it would be called, the module, the transmitter,
Yeah, the
actually
repeater.
is it inside the water tower or is it outside the water tower?
It's inside the outer case, I guess, and then it hooks up to the antennas on top of the water tower.
So
Is my understanding.
wouldn't it face the same weather conditions regardless if it was on its own tower or if it was on the water tower?
No, because it's still inside that outer, like, because there's two levels. My understanding, there's two barriers inside. So the outer barriers protects it, but then the condensation from the inside is still kept inside from the water reservoir.
I would like to add and just chime in here for 2 seconds here. Currently, right now in the water tower, our repeaters are covered up with tarps to try and keep the moisture off of them from anything that rains down from condensation. So looking at re-homing them would be a great idea right now. But understand that those repeaters are at the end of life right now.
So I guess to give a better visual picture too, if we were to build a new tower, just like all the other towers out there, there'd be I guess a house at the base of the tower. That's where all your equipment would be housed. And then only the antennas would be up on the tower itself. If you want to keep the old system.
Anything further? I guess then maybe for process moving forward, we can decide on what's staying in, what's coming out, or what's going into the parking lot. And then when it comes time to approve the budget, we aren't going to be going through things in detail to rehash it through. If we're going to add something, that's fine. If we need to take something away, that's fine. But going through a budget process twice isn't a great use of time for our administration. So adding it, taking it out is fine. Parking lot is fine, just not a whole presentation and debate on whether it's happening or not. I think would be a fair request. So through the AFRAC system, this is through MSI, right?
Mayor, can I ask a question? I left the room for a moment. Was it asked how long it would take to get the equipment
No, it wasn't.
through to Trent or to Alex? How long would it take to get this equipment here?
So as per my last discussion with the vendor that I've been working on for this pricing, we're looking at probably 3 months from approval of tender.
How long did you say? 3 weeks?
3 months.
3 months.
3 months. So if it was ordered now, and if you ordered half now, and then you ordered the other half in September, the other part would come in 23, and that could go in the 23 budget. So then we could have money left over from this year's budget to go into next year's budget, but they would be here within 6 months of each other.
But then you would run, and then you have to run 2 systems.
Pardon me?
You'd have to run both systems.
Yes.
If you're gonna phase it in. Yeah.
I just thinking about the cost, trying to divide the costs up to keep the tax rate down.
But we're running 2 systems. We're going to be having it to be able to run 2 systems anyways, aren't we? For other outside departments that aren't running AFRACs?
Yeah, and that would be their responsibility. So for instance, an example, if the county fire department's running their VHF, we'll just operate off their channel. Like it's their infrastructure, not ours.
Right. Are you proposing a phased-in approach, Councillor Elliott, or should we just call the question for the?
No, I'm fine with calling the question. Thank you.
Outright. Okay, outright purchase. Thank you. Manlock Center Maintenance Project.
Hello, Mayor, Council. So what we're looking at here is the Man Luck Center Maintenance Project. We basically got a group of items that are overdue, safety items and industry standard items that need to be completed for the pool. Defender filters, tub drain covers, pool valves, etc. Basically, we're looking at $94,000 for these services to be done, materials and services. We do have some risk there. If we don't do these things, we're looking at possible temporary closure of the pool, loss of associated revenues, risk of public injury if not completed, risk of legal liability if an injury occurs, and further deterioration. So as they're identified, we're again, like I said, asking for $94,000 for these repairs.
Questions, comments, Councillor Blocks?
Yeah, so I just have a question about why we are 3 years overdue and why the maintenance is overdue in general.
I've noticed that that's a trend in some of our facilities, I think due to budgets and like I came here in May of last year, so I don't have a long history of that. But yeah, since I've been here, I've been noticing that we are behind in some things, and basically this is to catch us up.
Can I redirect my question to a member of administration that has been here longer? Because I'm just trying to pinpoint why this is a continuous problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got here 5 years ago, I realized that we didn't have a preventative maintenance program in place and we hadn't actually done a review of all of the facilities. So in 2019, we got approval from council to do facility assessment review on 12 facilities, and we did the top most important ones. Manluck was obviously one of them. So from that, and then the hiring of Ches, we're going through and looking at the immediate needs, the high needs, the things that need to be done. And Ches is currently in the process of putting together proper preventative maintenance for every one of our facilities. It just wasn't done before. I don't know whether we didn't have the expertise in that area, or when the facilities were built, the O&Ms just weren't transferred over to somebody to say, these are the things that you need to do.
Okay, so going forward, this likely won't be as big of a budget impact for continuous maintenance.
Well, it actually might be pretty standard what you're seeing here. So one of the things that we need to do through our asset management program is identify those life cycle assessment costs. And we should be putting this much money into these facilities every year to make sure that they're maintained. Right now, what Ches is doing is just getting us caught up with the most immediate ones that pose the highest risk. Later this year, maybe even next year, administration will be coming forward to council to say, here's these reserves. We don't have a facilities reserve other than the infrastructure surcharge tax. So we'll be developing recommendations for council on how we can fund these moving forward and have consistent, stable funding so that we don't run into this issue again.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nielsen.
Just along the same line. So through the chair to Sue. So as we look at this new budget, are we seeing any increases in that budget to address the things you're just talking about, which is ongoing maintenance for this year? Or will we just leave it for a year and then play catch up then? So are we planning for money in the budget right now so that we can address those identifiable maintenance projects that need to occur now?
No. So we need to set that foundation. We've got a lot of the information now, and we need to build in that asset management plan. So through the operating business cases, we've asked for a program. Currently, the program that we are using internally is very limited on asset management abilities. And there's another program that we were looking at. We need to get all that data, whether it's the current or new program, we need to get all of that data put in. And we've had people working on parts of that throughout the organization for 3 years now. Once we have all the information put in with the condition, history, et cetera, then we start determining what their life cycle is, what needs to be funded when. And so we would just be guessing at this point. So the current budget does not have any of that in there right now.
So then if we had an urgent problem where we've had mechanical failures because we haven't maintained them over the years, where would those funds come from to deal with those issues as they arise?
We would come back to council and ask for a funding source, probably contingency.
Thank you.
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. Actually, I'm glad this is here. Obviously, we're starting to address some of the things that haven't been addressed. Having said that, there's some other things that aren't in here, and I'm just wondering, when COVID first hit, which was 2 years ago now, we had talked about draining the pool and cleaning it. Is that now on a schedule, and are we going to see it, and was that done?
Okay, I can answer that. I reached out to Natasha this morning because I just took over rec facilities in January. Right. So both pools were drained and cleaned in 2020 when we were shut down during COVID. They completed other maintenance as well during that time, painting, tiling, etc. So what Natasha and I are working on now is putting together a plan through Tyler and Jeff and me and Natasha to set up a schedule, the best time to drain the pool, get it cleaned, and do that maintenance work. So between me being the facility side, Natasha being the program side, just working together and making sure we're doing all this maintenance that we're planning with less impact on the community too.
So things like this have been identified, and there is a plan in place, and a schedule will be followed.
The schedule is not in place yet, but yes, we are planning it for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know it's not fair to say anything to staff who haven't been here very long. It's not fair to point fingers at them. I just wonder through to Chaz, Chaz, when you're doing the preventive maintenance update, are we going to look for efficiencies as well?
Definitely.
So, okay.
Yeah, and to go back to what Councilor Nielsen was saying as well, if things do come up throughout this year, although we don't have a major increase in our budget ask for facilities this year, we are looking at gaining efficiencies in other areas in facilities to help compensate and hopefully allow us a little bit of budget to take care of some things ourselves.
Yep. And there are grants available for some of those efficiency studies, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And just a question through to Natasha. Good afternoon, Natasha. I just was wondering, when I look through what needs to be maintained and upgraded, the surfing machine is not on the list. So does that mean that it's running smoothly and I'll stop there. Is it running smoothly?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, and good afternoon, everyone. No, the board rider still remains closed. So it was shut down for quite a long time, as you know, because of the COVID closures. And then when we went to start it up, it was not working. So there's 2 turbines and one of them is not functioning as it should. So we had a technician out to look at it, and they are still investigating what the issue will be. So we're just waiting for an update from them.
And I know that cost $1 million at the time that it was put in there. I'm wondering if anybody has looked at the stats of usage and wondering whether it's worthwhile taking it out and adding some different kinds of activities in that space as opposed to repairing it.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, so we have looked at the stats. And once we have a better idea of what it might cost to repair, we will do an analysis and bring that back to council for a decision at that time. It just really depends, obviously, what it's going to cost to fix, and of course, the revenues that we bring in.
Okay, thank you very much, Natasha.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you, sir. Through the chair to Sue, Councillor Blatz had my one question answered. Now, we have quite a list here and we're dealing with, as is mentioned, a lot of specialized equipment. Now, do we have the expertise in-house to be doing this, or are we looking at contractors out for certain things and some in-house, or how is that going on?
I'm going to defer to Ches for this.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the specialized equipment is going to require outsourcing. Natasha, can you speak to maybe where you got the numbers? Were they from the contractors?
Yeah, so all of the numbers that are listed were ones that we got from the contractors or from the company that supplies the materials for like the drain covers for the hot tub. But something like the Defender filter maintenance would come right from Master Pools, and they would be doing the work.
Thank you.
Councillor Blatz.
Just want to go back down the rabbit hole of continuing the preventive maintenance, because you talked about the contingency reserve would be where we would be funding it from. But when ongoing maintenance costs, shouldn't they be coming out of the operating budget rather than through reserves?
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Blatz. I think there's also a Manlock reserve, so it would probably actually be that reserve that we would pull from. But normally we would have an operations, like an O&M budget worked into the operations. And once we know what that average number is, we'll make sure that that's in there, including additional requests to transfer into the reserve so that we're catching up on the bigger items as well. So yes, normally it would be, but the contingency reserve is an operating funded, it is from surplus anyways. So, okay, thank you.
Anything else? Supporting of the work. Thank you. We are going to take a 10-minute break. Moving right along to facility asset management.
Welcome back. So our next charter here is the facility asset management ask. To proceed with immediate repairs as identified by the 2019 Associate Engineering Report. So basically, everything's there, everything is listed. These are the remaining items that weren't funded yet for safety code and end of life immediate items as identified. We're looking at $1,053,600. So the risk to not getting funded and getting some of these things done, or all of these things done, things are going to start causing us problems if they fail. So we can go through each item if you want, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory here what we're looking for.
Councillor Billingsley, then Elliott, and Nielsen.
Thank you. Ches, through the chair. Halfway down on page 19, $40,000 for, excuse me, inspect the VFDs in the ammonia room. I have no idea what a VFD is. And it says to verify working condition. This is an inspection for $40,000.
I think that's because it's an ammonia room. This estimate was given by Associated Engineering and taken from their report. VFD is a variable frequency drive. So if our variable frequency drive is down in the ammonia room, we're into some major issues. But yes, that estimate was taken from the Associated Engineering report from 2019.
I gotta get change professions.
Me too.
So, and next question has to do with the very first one at 260K, replacing electrical distribution panels. Are they failing? Like, are we running into problems that we're hiring out electricians to service these panels, or it's just that
Well,
they're old and we probably should at some point replace them?
Yeah, from the report, Associated identified that there were some issues there. And that, their recommendation was to replace. So basically, this is our ask from the report. If we get this approved and we can find ways to save money throughout this project, we will save money, right? If we get in and upon further investigation, determine that, out of that 260 for that first item, if we do, $180,000, we can take the other $80,000 and not spend it either, right? But basically, these numbers are from the report and their investigation with their electrical consultants. And, I have to take their numbers as what they are.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Ches. So related to this, there's a number of electrical items and then there's some roofing to do and those kinds of things. This will be tendered.
These will, yes, definitely be.
This will all be tendered. So once this is approved, then we could start early so we get our tendering out there and get a better price.
Yep. And like I said, these are estimates provided by Associated Engineering, and we will do our best, as we always do, to try to find the most effective way and efficient way to get it done.
Yeah, and just to answer Councillor Billingsley, I know with the drill hall with plugs, if you plug in 3 coffee urns within 15 feet of each other, you blow a plug, and so there's a lot of wiring like that in the facility. So
yeah, there are old panels in there.
and he knows from when he was trying to put in electrical equipment too. So thank you very much. That was editorial comment, was not from me.
Councillor Nielsen. Thank you. I'm on page 19, Chess. If we go down to the very bottom, under the total, so it was estimated for 1, we received 2091. I don't know what all that means. But then it says, we have determined that with approval of $1.187 million, we could complete all immediate fire and life safety codes, blah, blah, blah. So we've got a number here of 1187 and a request for 1053.
That is a typo that you just picked up on. So the correct number is the 1,053,600.
So with 1,053,600, if I put that number down below where the 118 is, that will complete all the immediate fire and safety codes.
From that report, yes, it will.
Thank you. Yeah, anything else?
Okay, just sort of related to the radios. How old is this report?
2019.
So those prices could or could not be higher as of 2022 then.
Well, they could definitely be higher.
Yeah.
What we would do in that instance is, haggle with people, for lack of a better term, and try to get prices down like our normal practice is. And if things did come in over budget, we would have to come back to council again.
Thank you.
Sue?
Through the chair to all of council, I would just like to point out that this particular, each engineering firm is a little bit different. This particular engineering firm has contingency built into their estimates, and that's why we didn't change this one. I know of other ones where they're within 5% every time. This particular firm tends to overestimate, so we left it the way that it was on purpose.
Just further to that, though, Mr. Mayor, so could there be other items that maybe should be added now that have come to end of life or need, they violate codes and stuff that have arisen since this report was made?
I haven't identified any since I've been here. And in talking to our team lead over there with facilities on the rec side, he hasn't identified any either. So this basically is our list that we're running off. Anything else that comes up or we find, we'll have to deal with it on just an individual basis then.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nielsen?
Just a clarification, Jess. When it says end of life, what does that really mean? Does that mean it's more than 5 years old, or does it mean it's failing? Or like, what's the interpretation of that statement?
End of life is basically the life expectancy is here and past. So if we've got, let's talk residential terms, I guess, to make it a bit simpler. So if you got 25-year shingles on your roof and you're at 30 years, you're 5 years past the end of life. You're going to start having issues at 30 years, and you want to get those shingles replaced now before you end up with something failing, and then you've got a leak, and then it just snowballs into something bigger. So really, end of life is you're at the life expectancy of that item, and it should be replaced.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions? Sorry for the question. You. The RCMP building improvements.
Hello, once again.
I don't think we need another update unless there's any questions from council. Differing from. Ready for the question? Thank you. I just watched Wayne. If he's got his hand up to speak, then it's time to talk. If he's got his hand on the sign, then.
You said we had to be out of here by 8.
Yeah.
I'm trying to help you out here.
Oh, long before 8, I assure you. I have no illusions of being anywhere close to being done. Asphalt overlays.
Good afternoon, members of council. So this asphalt overlay project is one basically to extend the life of any of our road infrastructure. Typically, asphalt overlays are done at about the 15-year mark after construction, and then again after 15 years and so on, so that we don't have to do reconstruction. So this particular project is along 40th Avenue between the county line and the Reynolds Museum. And so administration is requesting $992,200 to complete this work. It will include the asphalt. It includes reconstruction of the median, as well as some landscaping work.
Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you. To the chair, to Kathy. I'm on page 27, Kathy, on the very bottom under cost estimate. It says the cost estimates for 2020 are based on blah, 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 blah. Plus a 20% contingency. Then it goes on to say the contingency is higher because the CCTV and the utilities still need to be examined. And yet on the next page, or 2 pages over, 1 page over, it says geotech testing has been completed and shows whatever, and there's no utilities underground. So we got to, so do we reduce our contingency because of that, or was that corrected before, or?
Okay, sorry, the the project that was included before needed utility work. And so right before this, we axed a bunch of things. So that is incorrect. That should not say that it requires the CCTV inspection because there are no utilities underneath the highway. So that is an error. I will remove that. As far as the contingency will remain at 5% for geotechnical and 20% contingency in the project. So we'll just ensure that, because I don't have that number with me right now, but I can make sure that the project cost and the contingencies are not including with this, the CCTV piece.
And my other question is, how do we determine, or how do you determine the priority for roads being done? So, you know, I see cracks in the asphalt and so forth here in the pictures, but is this the most pressing of all of our roads in our community?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen. So a few years back, and I can't remember exactly what year, but we did an asphalt surface study that showed which roads required overlays or reconstruction. And so we prioritized them based on that. So this piece, so as you know, in 2020 and part of 2021, we did the other section from 56th Street all the way to the museum. So we wanted to finish that section of road in 2022 so that that entire area is completed and we don't have to come back in a couple of years to come back and do that. It's just easier to continue on and finish that section.
Okay, and that makes sense, I guess. So we're milling the road. It would be milled.
Yes, in sections.
And how do we avoid some of the difficulties we experienced in the first section?
Okay, so now we've obviously learned from some of the work that happened previously. So actually, and so Altaf Durrani, he is our new manager of engineering. So he, yeah, absolutely can answer more of those questions, but he is the one that was looking after this project in particular and how we're going to make sure that we don't run into the same issues that we faced previously.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity, Kathy. So yeah, to answer your first question, this section is not going to be milled because it is the structural capacity is below what is required based on the current traffic. And if you have driven that section, it has developed a lot of cracks because the structure is under capacity. So what we are going ahead with based on the study that Kathy mentioned, it is proposed to overlay it with additional 90 millimeters without removing any amount from the existing structure. So we are adding 90 millimeters on top.
So does that mean then that the asphalt will be sitting on top of the gutter then?
So, and Kathy also mentioned that so in order to do it properly and not repeat what we had done previously up to the Reynolds intersection, we are raising the median so that we do not overlay on top of the gutter. So the gutter is going to be raised on the median side.
So curb and median will both all be replaced?
Yes,
in the
they're
process?
going to be rebuilt.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. So we'll just tack coat the existing surface and put another 90 millimeters on top without milling.
After we've done the curb and gutter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, can I go again? So what happens with our catch basins and that? Because then they would be, unless we're raising our catch basins, and they're indicated that in here there was our catch basins and storm sewers and all the rest, we're in pretty good shape. Are we raising our catch basins to align with the curb and gutter?
Through the chair to council. there are 2 catch basins, one at each end of this section, and they will be raised.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm good. Wayne's got a sign, so ready for the question? Thank you. And I just put the sign thing on you, because if we go long, then I'm gonna blame
It's on
you.
me. I get it. I get it. If I get a phone call from your residents, I'm not answering.
Road reconstruction.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this, excuse me, this road reconstruction project that we're bringing forward will see the reconstruction of sidewalks, curb and gutter, and the road on Parkview Drive. This administration is asking for $1.5 million to complete this. This is also going to be part of a local improvement. So a portion of 50% of the cost will be paid for by the adjacent property owners. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you. Through the chair. First off, I'd asked the question, well, no, I'm gonna. There's been occasion where we, as a council, in conversation with Sue, have talked about local improvements. And we asked the question, what happens if a local improvement does not get approved? And kind of conversations have ended sort of like, we need to talk about this further, and we never have. And I guess the question that needs to be addressed short-term and maybe long-term is, if we have local improvements that are turned down, what does that mean for our community? Are we as a council prepared to let all these roads go to gravel? Or are we going to fix the roads? Now, I know that doesn't address this one specifically, but I had mentioned earlier that one side of this drive is in terrible shape. The other portion of the drive is in pretty good shape. And I am concerned that if we put it all in one package, the local improvement could be defeated, because the people on the one side who think they got a pretty good deal going don't want to spend money on behalf of the people who've got a crappy road on the other side. And so my first question is, have we split this project, or will we split this project? And then if it gets turned down, where does that leave us in terms of road conditions going forward?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. So to answer your first question, we have already split the project. So the entire project would have cost 3.5 million. We have only split this to be the south half of Parkview Drive and then up a little bit north around the corner. Just to answer your second question, if the petition goes through and more than 66.6% of people say they don't want it, then that leaves us, I guess, back at what do we do next? And that would be a bigger decision at council, whether or not we wanted to debenture funds to do road reconstructions or other options that we might have available.
Thank you. And so if I go to page 33, Kathy, and under cost estimate, like you're saying, the whole project would cost 3.5, which is what I'm assuming is here. Is that correct?
Correct.
So is it safe to say that the water estimate at 6.3 would be half of that? And what I'm leading up to is, if 50% of the surface is done through local improvement, 50% of 1.9 million is 988, but we're debenturing 554. Can you help me reconcile those numbers?
Yes. So, and again, this cost estimate is for the entire, if we were to do all of Parkview Drive. So I can't necessarily say that it's 50% because we're not doing 50% of the road.
Okay.
And work. So water and sanitary are not part of the local improvement. It's only the road, right? So if we were to pull that out, and we can
I know Altaf maybe has the cost estimate in front of him there, but so it's not directly 50% of that, just because
Okay,
it's
so
a
the-
smaller
but the
section of
five-
the roadway.
But the 554 is what you perceive the residence portion to be, and that's what would be debentured.
Yes, I believe that's how Diana had calculated that piece. Yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Councilor Billingsley?
I think the questions have been answered. Just for clarification, so then on page 32, where it says capital at 3.5, that is not accurate. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, yes, so that 3.5 would have been, so Altaf and I had considered putting the whole project forward and looking at the possibility of, if a petition went through and only the south half approved it and the north half didn't, then we could split it. But if it all went, then we would do the whole thing. So I guess it was more of, that was kind of an all in if we were to do the whole thing all at once. So yeah, so for 2022, at this point, we are only requesting $1.5 million to complete that south section.
1.5?
Correct.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yes.
Through the chair. The difference between the 3.4 and 3.5 is actually, if you're doing it in two separate phases, then it's 3.5. If you do it all together, it's 3.4. So
it's costing an extra $100,000 to split it as.
Yes, as a mobilization cost,
Sure.
extra mobilization, yeah.
And let me follow up then. This part that is not included in this, any idea how many years before that would be at the same condition of what the south side is in? Does that make sense?
Through the chair. From what I've, by the way, I only started around Christmas time, so I do not have a whole lot of history on this, but reading the reports and talking to the consultants who have been involved, they could not say that there's a huge difference between the surface conditions between the north and south side. But the residents may have different opinions, is what we are feeling. So based on that, we have split it into two. And the concern that Councillor Nielsen probably had raised, based on that, we have tried to split it. But as far as the actual condition is concerned, from the consultants, what I've been told is that there's not a huge difference.
Okay, thank you. And to administration, I guess if those residents on the north side wanted it, they could petition for it. And then there'd be that $100,000 then would be saved.
Yeah.
If they wanted it. Okay, thank you very much.
At the risk of you being home late today, Your Worship, I'm now on page 32 of 60, Kathy. So through the chair, you've identified 19 other possible local improvement circumstances based on, I'm assuming, need. How, is there a timeline or a guesstimated timeline or whatever in terms of working our way through this list? And the reason I asked the question, Kathy, is that if I do the same sort of math as Parkside, we would need to debenture over $8 million to accomplish these 19 roads. And we keep talking about our debt limits and so forth. So what are you foreseeing in terms of a timeline on these 19 properties?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. So in a perfect world, we could do one of these projects every year. In a perfect world, we'd have enough grant funding from the province that we wouldn't have to do local improvements. But we don't live in a perfect world. So these are proposed. So based on the study that was completed a few years back, based on the condition surveys and things, this is what that survey came up with. So these are the roads that are requiring reconstruction. So they are coming to the end of their life essentially. So the sooner we get them done, the less cost to the city and to the property owners. If you let a road completely fail, the costs go up substantially because we're going the asphalt layer, the base layer, and possibly even further depending on how bad it is. So ideally, we'd like to get these done in the next 19 years. Is that feasible? I'm not sure.
So would you say if I go to the very, I'm assuming these are listed in terms of prioritization?
Correct.
So can 51st Avenue, can it wait 19 years?
Sure. But then it would be a
complete
substantially
rebuild.
more expensive project.
Thank you very much.
Any further? Ready for the question? I didn't want to give away my answer. Sidewalk connectors.
Our sidewalk connector program is basically trying to connect any existing pieces that in the past have never been connected to other areas of the community. It's for pedestrian connectivity throughout our city. This year, excuse me, there are 4 locations that we are looking at completing and requesting $447,900 to complete this work this year.
Questions? Councilor Billingsley.
So when we put money aside for Peace Hills, sorry, not yet, for the Peace Hills Karen, did we talk about putting money aside for the sidewalks for that?
Just
Okay, so this would be something more that's being added to it. Okay. Just number 6 on page 35, I'm just a little curious if it has to how sidewalks lessen crime and the fear of crime. Like if you're walking on grass or walking on concrete, I don't know how that lessens the fear of crime.
You can get away quicker.
I guess you can.
Slipping on the grass. I don't wear my cleats everywhere throughout the town. Ah,
But this is supposed to help. It's worse.
the property in front of Denham Landing, when that development was done, would it not normally be a requirement of the development to have sidewalks in?
To the chair. So typically, yes, during any sort of development agreement, when new developments are occurring, that would be part of the development agreement to have sidewalks or trails or whatever installed. In this instance, as far as we can tell, there's nothing inside of the development agreement that states that they have to add that in. Though a lot of those items are included through an area structure plan, which in this case, there is no area structure plan. So moving forward, this subdivision will have to, or will be required to create outline plans before approval. So those sidewalks and everything will be included within the outline plans. We are looking into or digging more into the development agreement that currently exists to see if there's opportunity to include the sidewalk along 56th Street on the west side of 56th Street there.
And with that new development there, would that not, should that not have been included with that approval? Or is it not a possibility because under the existing area structure plan, it wasn't included then? So it wouldn't be something you could include now?
To my knowledge, the approval for that was done I guess, many years ago, and so that wasn't included then. But we can certainly look into it and see if there's opportunity to continue to add that in now.
And it would be skipping ahead a little bit, but the stairs project at Peace Hills Park for 218,000, I think. If that was coming through MSI, if council decided to reprioritize that, I guess, would there be capacity to add another $218,000 worth of sidewalk work this year instead of stairs at the park?
Yeah, we can certainly include more sidewalk work this year versus putting or looking into that Peace Hills staircase. Yeah.
Councilor Nielsen.
The risk of giving my strategy away, I don't know. So for me, I'd like to place this in the parking lot and not make a commitment at this point in time. And the reason I say that is I see $447,000 going into building more infrastructure at a time when we've got crumbling infrastructure that we're not addressing. And how long down the road before this $400,000 investment turns into a liability for more road repairs for some other council down the road to say, how the hell are we going to pay for this? Because we don't have any money. And I really wonder if we took this 447 and didn't debenture other projects, even the Parkside project, we didn't debenture that. And then Parkside project ended up becoming an asset rather than a liability in terms of us paying ourselves back over a period of time to recoup this amount of money. Whether I walk on grass, whether I've walked on grass for the last 20 years I've lived in the community, and whether I walk on grass for another 2 years is immaterial to me. And those people who have mobility issues may well have solved the problem by finding other ways to access certain areas. I'm really concerned about where our current infrastructure is. And I don't think we're addressing it as quickly as we should be. And that's why I would suggest we put this in the parking lot to give consideration to maybe moving this money into a different infrastructure project than sidewalk connectors.
I would absolutely support that, especially if it meant that we were fixing the existing sidewalks that we have that are in disrepair. I don't think that I noticed it as much prior to last summer, but the inaccessibility to sidewalks, off ramps before last summer, now pushing a stroller is totally different. So I couldn't even imagine what somebody with mobility issues has for struggles getting around our community. So I would absolutely way rather see existing infrastructure replaced or improved before we start building more infrastructure. Councillor Everly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to council in general, as we talk about this, if I'm being honest, this was one of the costs with these connectors that I was fully behind. When we talk about creating paths that are easy for accessibility, whether you're crossing a road, I know we think it's easy to cross a road if you want to get to you're going down there by the Peace Care as an example. You're walking down by the mall, you're doing these things. The ability, as we talk safety, one of them is that you can cross the street if you're not comfortable walking on that side of the street, because in that safety is that there is somewhere else to go. So it's not just whether or not Karen, who is fully capable usually of walking on grass, but whoever knows, it's the choice. And I think that's what I'm saying is we need to fix our sidewalks, but I think also including this walkability, making it more inclusive direction or accessible to people to have choices, that does add to the safety and the well-being and the feeling of a walkable community, which I do think that is one of the things I support. Thank you.
It's a great point. And as a risk of sounding wishy-washy, maybe we can do both. Adding some new sidewalks and repairing the existing or whatever infrastructure that we have that needs work to be done. Sue, and then Councillor Elliott.
If council does decide to put this in the parking lot, I will remind you that we had a para-ramp program that we submitted a couple years back that was turned down. So we have all the locations of where they're needed, and we could probably dust that off and bring it back if that is how council wants to redirect these funds.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just related to what Councillor Aberley was talking about, I sat on the Walkable Wetaskiwin Committee, and we did survey the community, and we had representatives from some of the other community organizations, and mobility is really important, and a lot of them don't have transportation other than their feet. And if these sidewalks were replaced, they're also easier to remove snow from. If we have grass trails in the summertime, our crews or whomever does not clean that in the wintertime. So they're either going through snow drifts or they're walking where there is no sidewalk. So I think we have to think about other people who don't have access to a car or transportation when we're talking about all these different sidewalks.
Maybe a piece of that, if we had reprioritized the funding from MSI for the stairs that we looked at, sidewalks, connectors, replacing, as well as improving what we currently have. So I would be okay with putting it in a parking lot. I'll call for that question instead of the approval of this, if that's okay. If you have anything else to add.
And I'm okay with a hybrid as well.
All I'm saying in putting in the parking lot, it gives us an opportunity. We haven't thrown it out. We've simply said, let's come back and visit it when we know what our final budget package is and what we can afford and can't afford in the community.
And exactly to that, but to the other options that we might have in terms of replacement and so I'll ask for putting it in the parking lot. Thank you. Sorry, Karen. Lane line rehabilitation.
So lane line rehabilitation project is basically an annual project that allows us to extend the life of all of our roadway markings, reduce operational costs for painting. We try to get thermoplastic as much as possible. They do have a 5-year warranty, but they also have about a 5 to 7 year life, just depending on the traffic and those kinds of things. So this project will be able to redo 5 intersections and stretches of road for a total of $84,700.
Councillor Billings.
I guess to Kathy through the chair, you said there's a 5-year warranty on this. Have we had any warranty claims? And if not, I'm going to guess we probably should.
As far as I am aware, there's never been any warranty claims. The installation of thermoplastic, that part is warranted, and typically, well, if you get a contractor that is good at it, there's no issues. The issue that we are facing with thermoplastic coming is anytime our graders are going and the blades are down, you eventually just peel it off. High traffic areas, same thing. So that's the reason why we have to keep, I guess, reapplying it, every 5 to 10 years or so, if we can make it last that long.
So if it fails, other than if they don't cover warranty for, I'm thinking of the crosswalk going to By the Lake Park on 57 Highway 2A. It's beat to crap. Half the inlays are gone. But that would not be considered warranty.
no, normal wear and tear is not part of the warranty. The, I guess, unfortunate part of the thermoplastic, especially with the crosswalk bars, is that the direction that our grader blades are coming at it is taking it right off the long edge of it. So, or from the short edge all the way. And that's why they end up peeling off.
Okay.
Just before, you move, when was that intersection done or that pedestrian crossing done?
That was done the first year we did thermoplastic, so I think 2019. 2019. Yeah, and further to that, I actually did, I was gonna say that that intersection's in good shape considering, because I looked at doing a warranty on that one and instead had a discussion with the grader guys telling them not to push down, like they were trying to lift it up when they went through there. So had they not done that the first year, or ever, it wouldn't have failed like it has.
Okay. This was to be, or suggested to pull out of the infrastructure reserve. As I stated earlier today of my feelings upon that. Karen did send out kind of the standards for the infrastructure reserve. And it said capital projects should have a term lifespan of at least 20 years. We're not getting 5. And I still argue that this is an infrastructure and I hold true on that.
Anything else? Councilor Nielsen?
I'm not opposed to thermoplastic or whatever, if that's a recommendation for the administration. But like Councillor Billingsley, I think we're going to the wrong source to fund it. If it was coming out of a different fund, then I could live with that, but and I know I've been stuck on this, but, and I sort of apologize, but not totally. We went to our public and said, we want $1.5 million a year to be accrued to go into infrastructure surcharge. And here's the things we're going to use it for. And on this project, I think if we are using it to paint lines on the road, it doesn't meet the criteria that we've talked about. And until we go back and fix it and communicate with the community that we are now going to use their 1.5 million for other things, and we've had that conversation, I feel like I'm duping our community. So that's why I'm stuck on this funding source. Could I ask a different question?
Just no, I want to touch on that first. Where would painted lines money come from?
Typically from operations.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Sue. Would wastewater treatment plant qualify under infrastructure surcharge?
Technically, the way it's written, it would, but utilities should pay for utilities, so it should come out of the reserves.
I guess one of the things that's in my mind is that if we're trying to minimize the cost to the ratepayers with regard to ongoing utility costs, one of the ways to do it is to minimize the amount of the debenture that we take out to begin with. And for me, the fact that the residents have paid into the infrastructure, it would make sense that we use that money to buy down the debenture, because then they're getting a rate of return, albeit maybe very small. They'd be getting a rate of return for actually putting money into the reserve to begin with. So, yeah, just that's a sidebar.
We have money in operating to cover this cost as opposed to infrastructure reserve.
We do not.
And what's the cost of painting lines as opposed to thermoplastic, aside from wiggles and squiggles?
Right, so when the decision was made to go this route, I had presented the council that the thermoplastic was about 10 times the cost, but we have to paint twice a year, and we can get up to 10 years out of the thermoplastic. So there really is no difference in costs over the life. It's just a much better quality product.
And doesn't call on our resources twice a year to do it. And that's why I say I'm not opposed to the project, I'm opposed to the funding source.
And I'm not opposed to the funding source based on the priorities that it is road infrastructure, and it says it should last 20 years. But that doesn't say it shall or it will. And I don't feel like that's duping residents or ratepayers in that we're using a reserve to look after our infrastructure, whether it's asphalt or painting of the lines that we need on that asphalt. For me, it falls under the same thing, and it's still looking after our infrastructure. Anything else? Yep.
So, but if we come back to the staircase scenario that you were talking about, Mr. Mayor. Those dollars were coming from where?
MSI.
So they couldn't be applied to this. MSI wouldn't apply to this.
No, unfortunately, we cannot apply it to this project because no grant funding will go towards this type of project. So we have tried in the past to get this type, the lane marking through to the MSI as well as at the time the gas tax fund, but neither one of those will approve this as an eligible project.
Thank
So
you.
that's why it's coming from an alternate source.
However, based on our infrastructure reserve policy, stairs would fall under that. In terms of a park, trail, park systems. But I want to do hog trading anyway, so. Horse trading. Anything else? In favor? You. Sidewalk rehabilitation.
So our sidewalk rehabilitation program is an annual project as well. This is a program kind of similar to the sidewalk connector, except it's replacing existing sidewalks with whether it's broken sections or major cracks or anything like that. We do have a criteria for the condition that where we replace versus if we just have to grind a piece of sidewalk until it gets worse. But this program takes into account many sites across the city that are failing with cracking and spalling and things like that. So administration is requesting $214,200 to complete this project this year.
Comments, questions? Councilor Blatt.
So if we take the funding from building new sidewalk connectors and put towards all of the failing sidewalks, then we could get done like 3 years worth of projects in one go.
And then took $218,000 from the staircase.
Now we could get done like 5 years projects.
We could do some additional sidewalk connectors and new sidewalks.
I like it.
Councilor Nielsen.
So just for clarification, these case studies we have right now are all based on MSI grant funding with the one exception that's in there. Is that correct? Yeah. So anything we deal with here will not affect tax base whatsoever. It will just, okay, I'm good. Thank you. So through the chair to Kathy. So when we talk about the sidewalk rehabilitation, do these costs include potential necessary landscaping, like as properties are higher or lower and all that kind of stuff?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, yes, this would include the removal of the concrete, the replacement of the concrete, and any landscaping adjacent to it.
To ensure that we have water runoff and all that.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
If there is an appetite, can I suggest that we put this into the parking lot as well? And if we get a report back from administration on the accessibility piece that we might be able to include, is that okay? Or do you want to approve this as is? I'll just call the question. You guys can tell me. Parking lot? Thought I'd give you a reason as to why. Yeah. Okay. Parking lot. And Peace Hills Park staircase.
So the Peace Hills Park staircase was a project that was brought forward during a regular council meeting in 2021. So our engineering department looked into the options for this. We have potential for locations. Now, I guess the constraint that we have right now is that there has not been any geotechnical testing or any actual surveying done on the hill to see where the best location for the staircase will go. So at this time, we are looking at requesting $218,800 for the staircase. However, what we're proposing is to get for 2022 to look at the surveying, do the geotechnical testing, and then do the layout and all the tree removal, things like that, that will be required. And then look at potentially doing the staircase in 2023 based on our short construction season. So we could approve the entire project now at the 218,800, or we could split it so that we're going to do a lot of the design work, engineering, surveying, those kinds of things this year, and then construct in 2023 is an option.
I'd really like to see it, but I think that to Councilor Nielsen's point of failing infrastructure that we have now, I think should be looked after prior to new infrastructure being put in place. Councilor Miller.
In our package, it talked about 3/4 of it being funded from a different form of a grant. And I guess my question would be, has that grant been applied for? Is it specific only to that project? Is there other things that we possibly could put that grant towards? I've got concerns about these stairs in the sense that we had a presentation from a citizen that wanted this. But we really haven't talked to the community to find out if she's the only one who wants this. I have no idea. Maybe hundreds do. Maybe she's the only one. I have no idea. There are lots of different projects out there that I'm curious if we could still apply for this grant, whether it's the tennis courts, resurfacing those. I've had lots of people asking about Norm Brown Field. Can we use monies with this grant that we talked about for that type of situation? So I really struggle with this staircase that it really hasn't been identified as a need in our community other than for that one person. So I can't support this. And I guess my question then is that grant still available for something else, or is it specific to this?
Counselor, thank you. I'm not familiar with this particular grant and what it's eligible, what projects are eligible for that. I know that it has been applied for. However, we can certainly look to see if there are other projects that it could also be applied for instead.
We parking lot it? For parking lot or taking it off? But the question right now is parking lot, so, okay. Oh, gotcha, okay. Okay, no parking lot. So now in favor of that, what would you like to see done with it?
Voted down.
No. This isn't keeping it. You can't have a negative motion. So keeping it. Okay, it's gone.
But can we ask administration to examine this grant for other potential projects?
Yeah.
Thank
Boulevard rehabilitation.
Our Boulevard Rehabilitation Program started in 2021. We believe it was quite successful. So this program basically rehabilitates sections of our boulevards that have kind of overgrown. They're higher than our sidewalks and causing drainage issues. So this project will allow us to keep moving in the older neighborhoods to get the boulevards back where the sidewalks can drain over. So we are requesting $272,000 to complete this work this year.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Did administration hear any feedback on the neighborhoods that were done?
I had heard back from one or two residents that had concerns prior to us going in there, and after we went in, they were quite pleased with the work that was done and that their sidewalk drains off and they have no more issues, which is great.
Perfect.
I had also heard from people in other neighborhoods, when are you coming to do ours?
And did you tell them?
Councillor Blatz.
There's that moment this past summer where we were tearing up the boulevards and then putting in sod. Yeah. There was a moment this past summer where we were tearing up the boulevards and then putting in sod, and the sod work was really done poorly. There was a lot of the sod that ended up dying off. There were some that there was just a lot of gaps between, and I had a lot of residents that were really upset with how the sod work was being done. And I was wondering if this is a similar project where you tear up the boulevard and then put sod down again, and if we're going to do that again, if we're going to do a good job with the sod.
Through the chair to Councillor Blatz. This is the same project. We do have warranty. Under the warranty piece with the landscaping company, they have to ensure that the grass is alive and things like that when it becomes our asset to start maintaining. on, I guess, properties that are adjacent to those boulevards. If it's not city adjacent property, then the property owner would have to maintain it. But essentially, it's still city land. So when we accept it as completed, that warranty piece is there to ensure that the grass is actually growing and that it's done properly.
Thank you.
What's the time period on that? Like, was it last summer that we had to have filed a warranty claim for it, or like we'll see this summer if the grass hasn't taken, then we can file those warranty claims?
So at the end, so beginning of fall of 2021, we would have issued a construction completion certificate. And so then we still have an additional, I want to say landscaping is only an additional year for final acceptance. So at the end of this fall, we would make sure that everything was growing and everything was good before we accept
But
it.
that's more than enough time if grass isn't
Oh,
going
yeah.
to, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Elliott.
So just to clarify then, through to Kathy, the homeowner is not responsible for any watering initially when it's planted.
That's correct. It's all up to the contractor.
So they come around with watering trucks and,
That's right.
okay. I just think because people are already complaining about the high price of water in Wetaskiwin. Now you expect me to water the boulevard, so. Thank you.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Utilities. Yes. Just turn your mic on, sorry.
And then that way that will.
You'll have
commit-
to start, just start from the beginning, just for
Oh,
people.
okay,
yeah.
sorry. If we can get a motion regarding the amended 2020 proposed capital budget, that way administration will have the ability to go out to tender for those projects that council has left in. And I can go over what my understanding is in, and also make the adjustment to the motion.
Sure.
Okay, so based on the spreadsheet that you were provided, the AFRES, the radio systems are in for 223,000 from MSI. The Manlock Maintenance Project, 94,000 from MSI. The Facility Asset Management for the Civic Center, 1,053,600 from MSI. The RCMP Building Improvements, that was reduced to 89,300 from MSI. Asphalt overlays, 992,200, the CCFB. I can't remember that acronym. They keep changing them on me. Shouldn't do that to retired people. The roadway reconstruction, $1,500 in with funding from the CCFB of 945,600 and 554,400 from local improvement. The sidewalk connectors have been moved to parking lot, so they've been removed. The lane line marking rehabilitation, 84,700 from the infrastructure reserve. The sidewalk rehabilitation has been moved to the parking lot, 214,200. The Peace Hills Park stairs has been removed. And administration will look to see whether or not the Canada Community Revitalization Grant can be used to other projects. And then the Boulevard rehabilitation for 272,000 is from MSI. So what that leaves us is with a proposed 2020 capital budget of 4,308,800 with 3,669,700 coming from grants, 84,700 from the infrastructure reserve, and 554,400 from local improvements.
Could you repeat the grants number for me, please?
Yep, 3,669,700.
Canada Community Building Fund.
Yes, it's in there, but.
Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you. I'm concerned about perhaps a misunderstanding in the sense that we put things into the parking lot, which could potentially go back into the budget. So if we pass a motion with a dollar value attached to it, and then we decide to do something with the parking lot item, what does that do to the motion we just made?
It doesn't affect the motion you just made. All you would do is when, sorry, to the chair through to Councillor Nielsen. When the project comes back, then what council's motion would be to add that project to the 2022 capital budget.
Okay.
Okay, so those items that are in the parking lot, once the administration comes back with what they would recommend to do in terms of what council has said today, then council will make an additional motion, but just adding it to the budget.
Okay, thank you. Can I continue? So I'm on page 7 of 60 right now. And this talks about balance of uncommitted funds at the end of 2021, MSI, and so on. At the bottom of the page, it says we have a total of $2,091,073 in uncommitted grant funding. So we know we have $2 million sitting there. I guess I'm wondering why. What's the rationale for leaving it sitting there? I guess that's my question. Sure.
To the chair, through Councillor Nielsen. Basically, it's sitting there because you haven't got enough capital projects to spend it all. Okay. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss with council today as well is that during the 2021 budget deliberations, council had directed administration to move a portion of the 2020 year-end surplus to reserves to fund several capital projects, one of which was the ice plant. So the ice plant project, Paul has just gotten an update on the cost for that project, and it's about $1.1 million. And originally it was to be funded from this surplus, which is now in the stabilization reserve. And my recommendation to council, because you do have this $2 million, as you said, sitting there, would be to fund that project instead from MSI. So that the 1.1 million would be funded from MSI, which would basically demonstrate to the province and the federal government, if you will, that you need the money as a community. Secondly, it leaves the 1.1 million in your stabilization reserve, which is your money, and you as a council can basically decide how you want to allocate that money. Being that it would be left in the stabilization reserve, the intent of the stabilization reserve when we set it up was so that council could manage to stabilize the tax rate. So instead of having rates going up and down, you could access funds that were in the stabilization reserve to help you to level off annual tax rate increases. With the 1.1 million left in the stabilization reserve, council will have the opportunity during your budget deliberations to have those funds available to look at the 2022 operating budget.
So then if out of this $2.091 million, we go to the ice plant for 1.5.
1.1.
1.1. We would still have 1.1.
Almost $1 million.
We'd still have almost $1 million sitting in MSI grant funding. So then my question still is, if we know we have sidewalk problems, $20 million of liability on facilities and so on, would we not be wise to do more projects? Because every year we keep hearing, let's get our tenders in now because we'll get better rates for it than if we wait next year rates are going up. So I guess my question is, would we be better off spending the 1 million now, getting more bang for our buck than waiting a year from now to do something with this?
I do think, through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, I think it's a wise idea. I would suggest not more projects because we purposely put in fewer projects this year because we don't have the resources, but we could expand existing projects that we're managing because it's just as much work to manage a $100,000 project as a $1 million project. In a normal year, we would have many more projects in front of you, but because of our resourcing concerns, that's why we pared back. So absolutely, we could increase any of the existing.
Sure, and I didn't mean that we necessarily need new projects as such, but the other question I guess I have, the dollar figures that are in here for MSI, are these the adjusted dollars based on the provincial announcement about grants and MSI dollars being?
Yes,
cut
they are.
back?
I've got the confirmation.
So-
The estimate that they provided on their website is the exact numbers that I'm
Or
using.
here?
Yeah.
And then they're talking about another 25% cut next year?
Actually, it was interesting. Sorry. We just got a letter from the minister, Mr. MacGyver, and in it, he says, as a result, MSI funding for 2022 and 2023 has been reduced proportionately to 485 million each year. And then later he says, he says, even as we help municipalities adjust to new funding levels. So at this point, we're not having to adjust to new funding levels. This is the same as previous years. They topped up last year. They gave extra monies
Right.
last year, but I think that he's laying the groundwork for new funding levels that are going to be less, but he hasn't indicated what he's going to be.
Because the
reducing.
initial letter that I saw talked about it being cut 50% this year, then another percentage the following year, and then boosted back up again in
Yeah, I-
2024.
That's not,
Not there.
this is a recent letter from February 24th.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So we're adjusted and we're all good here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So how do we entertain a conversation about broadening projects? Or extending projects or?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, I think that would be part of the parking lot discussion when you start to figure that out, and then we could amend this motion or add to the capital plan through another resolution. Once you decide what we're going to do, we will bring forward the para ramp program and the locations of those. And Neeraj also has many, many years of rehab that needs to be done. He's got a lot of it documented. So when we put forward a capital budget, we try to spread the money out through all the programs. But he would be happy to get a lot of that sidewalk stuff cleaned up, I'm sure. So let us gather those lists. And then when we have that parking lot discussion, or we'll get it to you ahead of time for that discussion.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, motion on the floor. Somebody want to make that? Councilor Nielsen.
I'd like to move that we move into the operating budget. Does anybody want to defeat that motion? I would make the motion that Diana has put forward.
Okay, any discussion? Question, all in favor? Carried unanimously.
No green? No green?
This wasn't a straw poll, this was an actual motion. It's too heavy.
Your worship, if I could at this time, I guess what I'd like council to consider is the other motion that I put forward regarding the ice plant. I do have a slide with that motion on it, if council would like to entertain. What we have to do is we essentially have to change the funding source, if council is in favor of changing the funding source from the stabilization reserve to MSI.
Do you have that?
Do you have that, Karen? There should be a slide. It will be right after the capital budget.
Was it in the primary document?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
For clarification, if that's the case, right now, how much is in the stabilization?
We are still doing our projections, but if you make that motion, I can tell you that 1.1 million is in there.
In stabilization,
If you make this motion to change the funding source.
but you want to move it to MSI?
Yes.
You're
correct.
suggesting that it move to
Yes.
MSI? But so we must at least have 1.1 in stabilization.
Oh, correct. Yes, because you were going to fund this project from. there.
Correct. And I'm just wondering, is there 2 in there? Is there 5? Is there?
And
50?
again, there were several motions of council throughout the year, and we want to capture all of them before we come forward with the projection. As I said, I'm hoping to have that for the continuation of the budget deliberations on Wednesday.
See, and I'm concerned about that because I don't know how much is in stabilization. There could be far more than we need. So I'm not prepared to entertain this till I know exactly what's sitting in stabilization.
I assure you, we don't have more than we need in stabilization, even if it was $50 million.
But is there 1.8? Is there 1.7? Do we need $700,000 in stabilization?
I would say for me, the funding source of us taking this out of MSI to look after something and it not coming out of a reserve that we could potentially need down the road, we continue to use our reserves as a checking account.
Totally
And I'd
agree.
really like to get away from that. So if we've got a grant that's available that'll look after this ice plant that we need, I'm happy with leaving the 1.1 in stabilization so that we don't continue to use the reserve as a checking account to look after maintenance.
And I'm with you 100%. My concern is how much is sitting in stabilization and do we need that kind of money sitting in
We
stabilization?
can redistribute a reserve through a motion anyways.
That's correct. As it's your money and to Councillor Billings, to the mayor, you can redistribute if, when we bring the balance, the uncommitted balance to council for your review, then at that point in time, you can decide to reallocate those dollars somewhere else, possibly the infrastructure reserve or wherever else you feel that the Maniluk Center maybe might need some funds. So you have the option to do that.
RCMP retro pay.
Why, I guess my concern is why are we in such a hurry to get this done without, we're getting that information on Wednesday. At least then we would have that information to make an informed decision here.
For me, if we had $1.1 million in there or $101 million in there, it wouldn't matter. That's not where I want that funding to come from to replace the ice plant. The amount of funds we have in the stabilization fund or reserve doesn't matter to me.
So, but that doesn't answer the question. Why are we doing it today and not on Wednesday?
Simply
What's
because it's part of capital.
okay?
Okay, so it's part of capital. So then this then allows us to go ahead with the capital project, the ice plant, and know where and confirm where we've got the funding coming from, if we decided to make the change. And again, I included it at this point because this deals with capital as opposed to operating.
Councilor Nielsen.
Whether to make the decision on funding for an ice plant today, I don't think, are we suggesting then that a tender is going out tomorrow for an ice plant, a turbine? No, so waiting 1 day does what in terms of ordering a turbine?
Just for clarification on the ice plant, those funds were approved as part of the 2021 capital program. So the funds have been approved for the ice plant repairs. I guess the question is where do you want it funded out of?
Absolutely. That's the issue. And then I'd argue then why are we doing any deliberations today if we don't have all the numbers until Wednesday anyways? I'd like to start getting through our budget and through the deliberations. We could put off any number of decisions until Wednesday. So if somebody would like to make the motion and you don't support it, then we carry on. Sue.
Could I just caution not defeating a motion right now, because our bylaw says we can't
But there
bring
would
it
be
back.
new information coming on Wednesday where we would be able to. bring it
Okay.
back.
And I think too, further to what Diana and Mayor Gandon were saying, it's the rule of thumb is spend someone else's money before you spend your own, right? Which was what we were getting at here, but yeah.
Or there isn't a motion made and we carry on through our budget.
I move that council change the funding source from the ice plants project to MSI. thereby leaving $1.1 million in the stabilization reserve.
Moved by Council Lonsdale. Any discussion? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An email from Paul dated 23rd of February said that the total cost of this project is supposed to be $1,073,658. So that's a little bit less than what the $1.1 million, but so we just asked them to pay the 1.1 and leave the other 1.1 in the stabilization reserve. That's what you're doing? Okay. Just clarifying. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Or sorry, opposed. Sorry. I was looking for a red plate or a. Where would you like to go to? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we just wanted to point out to council that when the project team was looking at the MCC financials, that the ones that were published already to the public and have become part of the business plan and approved by council, they were based on this exact budget. So making any changes to this right now could potentially affect the ability of the MCC with their rates and or having a shortfall if there were cuts that were going to be considered and such. So my suggestion to council is not making any changes to this budget and rather explaining to the MCC, this was the budget we had, this was the budget you based your budget on. And then any changes would come through the board of directors. And then if it did have a rate impact, it would come back through to council. But as per the business plan that was submitted, there was no suggested rate changes for 2022. Of course, part of that discussion was if we're looking at a 25% rate increase in 2024, do we look at potentially phasing that in? So when the MCC is stood up and the board of directors have a look at this and make some recommendations, I think that would be the time for council to make any decisions based on utility rates.
Thank you. Pardon me. My questions relate, I guess. Gotta find out which page I'm on here. I'm jiving it with. So. There we go. So I'm on a page. I'm under water supply, Sue. And I'm down at the very bottom. Where it's showing transfer from equity in capital assets, 1.4 million. Is there intended to be a transfer from that amount?
Through the chair to Councilor Nielsen, I'd have to let finance talk about those transfers. But yes, all of the tangible capital assets we have will be part of a different agreement. So it's even more than this. But Diana can speak to that specific one.
Your worship, through to Councillor Nielsen. So the draft 2022 water and wastewater budget has been put together to provide council basically with what the budget would have been if you were continuing to operate the utilities yourself, because my understanding is, as Sue said, that this was what the budget was based on. Now, in terms of the transfer from equity and capital assets, that is essentially amortization.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so you will see on the next page, there's an identical number for amortization expense. So it offsets itself. And the reason that this budget is being brought forward to council is because during 2022, you are still operating the water and wastewater utilities for a period of time until it's transitioned to the MCC. So approval of this draft budget allows us to continue to operate those utilities until such time as they're taken over by the MCC. So that's why it's being presented. In addition to that, what you'll see on the last page of the budget is an addition from the finance area. So there are a couple of things in this budget that essentially, because you're transitioning to the MCC, that are going to impact on your operating budget for taxes. One of them is the cost of the hydrant rentals. So in the draft budget for the water and wastewater is $107,000 of revenue from the hydrant rental. That cost is now also in the fire department, okay, in our operating budget. And in addition to that, we would get penalties on accounts receivable for the water and wastewater utility. So those penalty costs, an estimate of them is presented in this as well to reflect the portion of the utility bill that relates to water and wastewater that would conceivably go to the MCC because they're going to be doing your billing and they're going to be doing your collections. So they're going to be assessing the penalties and therefore they're going to be taking in the revenues. The question that will come forward, because if they're doing all of the utility billings, then the question is for the solid waste and recycling utility, will a portion of those penalties be remitted to the city, or through your negotiations, will you simply say that the MCC will keep all of the penalties on the billings? Again, it could be a reconciliation nightmare, but it is something that when you're talking about transitioning to an MCC, some of these small things need to be discussed to determine whether or not that's something that wants to be handled in the agreement. So essentially, the reason that this is being put forward is because in 2022, being a transition year, you do need to approve a draft budget until such time as it's transitioned to the MCC. And then it should be prorated at that point.
Thank you. And then through the chair to Sue, can you give me a Reader's Digest version of the utility revenues coming into the city? And we have an ROI and an admin fee. What are those two items? What are those two items? What are those two items? Let's go there.
Through the chair to Councilor Nielsen. So we've discussed in the past how the ROI and the admin fee previously, I think 10 years past, were all one number, and then it was broken out. The admin fee was basically covering administrative time for the function of utilities. And then the ROI is like any other utility, you get a return on that investment. When we looked at the total amount moving forward, it was deemed that as per the energy EUB guidelines, that 8% is acceptable. And that's what this comes out to. So this is something we would be looking at the MCC to still return to the city to help offset the tax base for that that ROI. Yeah.
So then so for this next budget year, the same will hold true. The money will all come rolling in to finance here. We'll withhold 8% for ROI. We'll withhold a certain portion for admin fee for all the billing and so forth that we do. That will leave X number of dollars left over. Does all of that then go back into utility reserves? We transfer it all back out?
No, so once the MCC stands up, the city will not be collecting any money. It would all go
No,
through.
I'm talking about this year right now.
Yeah, well, right now we are, but let's say it stands up in April, May, then as of May, we're not collecting. I don't know. I mean, it might take longer, let's say July. As of July, the MCC will start putting bills out and no money will come into the city accounts.
No.
And then they pay us.
Okay, but between January and whenever MCC does their thing.
Yep.
We are taking that revenue in here, we're peeling off our portion, there's a lump left. And is that prorated all back into utility reserve, or where does that total chunk go?
Yeah, the amount minus expenses would go into the reserves. Just for the water and wastewater piece, the waste and recycling one is separated. So it would stay in reserves and then those reserves get transferred to the MCC.
So that would mean to me then that whatever is left in that revenue pool that we didn't peel off, the first piece would go to cover expenses, which would be salary, operations and all that. And then if there's anything left after that, it would go into reserves. But if there's nothing left after that, there'd be nothing added to reserves.
I would hope that we weren't spending that much.
No, but that, I'm just philosophically speaking, the first draw on that big pool after we've taken our share is to offset operational costs.
Currently, yes. When the MCC stands up, there's a $200,000 amount that was put in for administrative costs. We would be expected to use that amount and stay within that budget after.
And we got a document, and I can't find it amongst all this paper, but that said, what are our current utility reserves right now? 64,000 or something?
More like 6
Oh,
million, 6
yeah.
million.
6
4.
million, okay.
Yeah.
All my numbers are a little bit. What's thousands and millions, friends? So that we would expect then to be putting more money into those reserves up until the end of May, June, July, whatever it happens to be.
Correct.
And when we had the presentation here, and they were talking about return on investment, they were taking their piece of the return on investment. I think they called it delta factor or whatever. So the return on the investment for the city comes directly back to the city.
Correct.
And that ROI is determined by what?
Right now, the numbers are the same. So if you look in the operating budget at the very beginning, I think it's in non-functional. There's a revenue in there from return on investment and ROI, or sorry, ROI and admin fee. Those numbers we're expecting to still get back. Some of that is waste and recycling, but the majority of it is water and wastewater.
So even though the rates go up, our return would
Stay the same.
remain fairly flat.
Mhm. And ideally, in a perfect world, we could get that down because it's just like every other utility. But for this year, we needed to keep everything status quo until we figure out where the potential savings are on that side.
Thank you.
Does that cover you, Councillor Billingsley, or do you still want to wait till Wednesday? Any other questions? Then your motion then is just to accept as information. Okay.
Sorry, Diana, could you say that one more time for what the motion should be?
I did it again. That council adopt the 2022 draft utilities operating budget as presented.
Tyler, for clarification, do we adopt drafts and is there going to be a final? Like,
No, I guess you can just call this, I call it the draft when we're presenting it.
yeah,
And because there may be changes, but if there are no changes, then just accept the 2022.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, let me fucking.
Is there a motion on the floor?
No.
Nobody's made it.
Sorry?
Nobody's made it.
Do I have to wait? Can I ask some questions or?
I'd like a motion on the floor and then we can get into questions.
Excuse me, Karen, can you change that? Sorry, the 2022 water and wastewater utilities, because we're just doing the two. Thank you. Wastewater, yeah.
I'll move that.
By Counselor Butts, Counselor Nielsen.
I'm on the second page, I guess, under Public Works, Utilities, Water Supply, Crossing Center 710. So I'm looking at, for example, utility bulk sales. We budgeted 50,000. Last year we budgeted 50,000, but we took in 110,000. So are we underestimating revenues?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, that was done. We've been monitoring the use from Musqueam. So we had updated council that they got a project approved for their well upgrades for their water treatment. And we were anticipating that they were going to be cutting back on their water usage from us. So that was where that came from.
And then if I go down to line 44430, utility service charges. Again, we budget 1.3 and took in 1.6. But we're now budgeting 1.2. So $500,000 less on service charges. What would that entail?
A point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nielsen. It's a little disruptive in the sense that the lines, the columns. So when you're looking at the 110 that you said with regards to the bulk water sales, that was actually the budget in 2020. So in 2021, and in the actual was 55,541. In 2020, the actual was 46,472 for the bulk water. So in 2021, the budget was reduced to 50,000.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Gotcha.
and in
Yep.
2022, we increased the budget to
Thank
55.
you.
Okay.
My apologies. Yeah.
No, and the same similar with the utility service charges. In the 2021 actual, you'll see the 1.3.
Yep.
And the budget was 1.2 because
Yep.
you had reduced
Gotcha.
utility
Yep.
rates.
Thank you.
And we brought it back up to the level of 2020. The actual for 2020, which was the 1.76.
I was misreading my lines.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no.
We had that much of a jump in penalties on accounts for 2021.
Yes, your worship, 2021 was a difficult year for people, and I think that that's reflected in the revenues that were generated. Now, you'll note too that the full amount was allocated to just the water collections, but it should have been split between the water and the sewer collection.
Mr. Mayor, can I get clarification? We're talking about going more electronic, are we not, with our billing system? I guess it's through the Sue. So our postage and stationery should be coming down eventually. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott. I do not know how the MCC is going to do billing, and their budget is based on this budget. So we've left everything as is until we can figure out how Aquaterra does their billing.
I'm just thinking of automatic debits and those kinds of things. So that's something we would be looking at, don't? Thank you.
For clarification, no, we won't be.
I'm sorry, MCC will be.
Right.
But the city is also.
Yes.
No, I'm trying to.
Cut me to the quick. Quick.
It's not enough biosteel in there.
I'm gonna get more.
You get half of it into your cup.
I got this whole package this time.
Anything else? Aside from Councillor Elliott's sports drink preference? We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Carried unanimously. We've got 30 minutes. Sue, how would you like to spend it?
Drink it.
I believe the next is the operating budget we break into.
Unless council wanted to discuss FCSS and the library
Yes.
presentation.
Okay,
Sure, we can
great
do it.
idea, Diane.
Start with the library. Maybe I should go more often if I call it library instead of library.
For council's information, sorry, Mr. Mayor, to council, within the draft 2022 operating budget is included city contributions to programs, a total of 554,540. Of that total, 84,300 is related to the FCSS request, and the balance is the library. And the balance for the library, excuse me, sorry, I have it here. Is $470,240, which based on the library's request, and I wrote that down here too, where I have the numbers. It's approximately 79,000 short of what the library is requesting, because they were requesting 549,401 as opposed to the, and I had it written down, but I'll get you the number shortly.
Discussion, Councillor Billingsley.
So the requisition from the library, and again, I'll use approximate numbers, $550,000. Last year was 504. Essentially, their increase is approximately the amount of COLA. Now, does that speak to the concern of the amount that they have in the surplus. No, but that is restricted funds and we can't hold that back from the library. So I guess if we're going to look as a council for COLA across the board for this organization, I think that that would be a fair amount to give the library. Is it's not like they're looking for a sizable increase other than about 4%.
I'd like to have the discussion on COLA as opposed to approving it for the library, if that's the increase. As
Yep.
opposed to, yeah, so
I agree.
if there's no other concerns or questions or discussion on the library, can we leave it as is and keep them in line with what council decides on a COLA for the rest of the organization?
I could support that. So in other words, take what we gave them last year, increase it by the amount,
By COLA.
percentage, whatever is decided
Whatever COLA
upon.
happens to be, yeah. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but at the same time, council and or the library and FCSS are not part of the city anymore. So they can create their own pay scales. They can create their own ledgers. They can create their own increases.
Absolutely.
So if they choose to do something different with COLA than the city does, that is totally acceptable.
Without a doubt, my increase of the funding to the library would be based on what COLA is, and if they decide to do 14% and take that from someplace else, that's the library board. That's got nothing to do with me. My increase will be based on COLA because their increase is based on what COLA.
Their increase is also based on hiring a part-time staff.
Yes.
One extra staff, which they did a very good job during the pandemic and the curbsides and everything with the staff they had. And they're, so I don't want to forget that. Thank you.
Do you want to then, well, then that can be part of the discussion that the library's requisition will be last year plus the part-time staff plus whatever we decide COLA is for the organization?
No, because they've actually reduced some of their spending. Like it
But
isn't.
how they spend their money?
No, and I get that, but if you say that, then and even if, let's say we settled at a 0% COLA, that position has already been factored in at that 543,
Oh, okay.
right? So,
But that's what, okay, but what?
and we can't tell, I mean, if they wanted to hire.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
you
I'm
bet.
just saying that from what they got last year. So if we're matching that plus COLA, but if there was that additional part-time staff, if they were reducing funding to get to that last year's total, you just tell me how you want to get to the number, the end number.
Yep.
My only concern is that if we're going to offer COLA, that if the increase is going to the library, whatever they do with it is regardless, is irrelevant to us. What they do with it is fine, but if we keep our COLA increase standard across the board, that's up to them to manage.
Where's COLA? Oh.
For the library or for everybody? Everybody is 4% or 440,000.
When you said everybody, you mean everybody.
Outside, not FCSS, not library. Sorry, not FCSS, not
And I
library.
can't
but the
find
city
it. It's not-
organization.
that's not there.
Correct. That's what's proposed. Yeah.
I was looking at the other budget. Mhm.
what number the library was off the top of your head? Department for libraries for the
Is 370,
370. Thank you.
but they're not in our budget this year. Because they had a separate,
Yeah, no, I just want the department and GL codes from last year that were budgeted. Further with library? Yes, no, maybe so. Are we good with library then?
What?
Yeah. There's just nothing else that you want to change or see or move on, okay? Library parking lot. FCSS.
Again,
Yep.
I do have a question about the monies that was given to FCSS last year. Unlike the library, or maybe it is like the library, their surplus, the provincial government portion has to be spent. Our portion, where did that go? Because, and I guess my concern is going forward, are they gonna have the ability to spend $421,000 for calendar year 2022?
To the Mayor and Councillor Billingsley, FCSS board was here about a month ago, providing a presentation or overview of how their plan and what their expectations were on how they're going to spend some of those surplus dollars. Both Sue and I have a meeting with the province next Monday, to discuss the surplus, discuss the FCSS's plan moving forward, and get a better sense of the impact of the future grant dollars. But from my understanding is the government of Alberta, FCSS, was looking for just a plan in regards to how they would spend those surplus dollars. And then becomes the question on whether or not they can actually do that. I can't speak for can they actually do it, but I do know that the board came here about a month ago with a plan in place, and that they do have plans to expend a good chunk of those dollars.
My concern of reducing the 85,000 or 84,291 is it because it's an 80-20 split, a reduction by $20,000 makes a huge difference in the overall amount.
I don't think we can. I think they tell us how much it is and we just have to match the 20. I don't think they base it off of how much.
So, and that was where I was going with
Yeah.
that.
We get that. So the province decides what our 80% is, and then the city has to come up with the 20%. So we can't decrease it.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't dictate that.
That's a concern of mine.
Yeah. So how they spend it or what they do with it moving forward, that'll be between Paul,
Okay.
the FCSS, and the province on how they're able to spend or not spend that surplus, and figure out a plan moving forward. Go ahead, Paul.
So acknowledging that FCSS is in a situation where they'll have multiple surpluses, most likely, administration is keeping a very close eye on this, and will be keeping council aware of what the impacts to the grant will be moving forward.
Thank you. through the chair to Paul, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Dean. The proposal that came forward in terms of the plan that they had for spending the money has changed since that meeting. And it's changed significantly. They've dropped a number of projects that were on that list. And so if you are in the position where you have to present the plan, it is not what it is. It is not what it was. Just so it's just an FYI.
Through the mayor to Councillor Nelson, I will connect with their board chair prior to the meeting on Monday, just to get a sense of exactly what is the plan. And the province primarily was looking for, how are you going to spend those surplus dollars? And then the other question I have is, you know, how many years of a surplus until it impacts the overall grant? I don't have those answers for you today.
So no increase to FCSS. That would be really the only thing that we're looking for direction. Perfect. Good with that? Not parking lot, accepting as is. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can we get a motion? Then it makes it more clear.
Sure. What would you like the motion to say?
That council
Approves the SSS budget
approves
for
the
2022.
FCSS request for $84,300 in support.
You're bossy, but you're nice about it.
I know, well, I keep forgetting to say through you, you know, to everybody else, so.
That is the least of my worries.
Okay, so that, that city council approves the request from the FCSS in the amount of $84,300.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any further discussion? Are we ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. You have something that will last 16 minutes? Perfect.
I could do the overview, but I think it's better if we do it all at once.
Okay, we'll do it all at once then. What's that? Diana will provide an overview, but we'll do that all together. Looking for a motion to adjourn. No?
Just prior to adjournment, Mr. Mayor, we're meeting on Wednesday. And the hope is that we will be finished everything on Wednesday, nothing happening on Thursday or Friday.
That is a hope, but if it's not done Wednesday, we will reschedule another day. Right now, we don't have anything scheduled for Thursday or Friday, other than CO evaluations on Friday. But no.
So we wouldn't continue on Thursday is what I'm
We
asking.
will not. We will set a new date if we're not done Wednesday night.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Aberley.
Do we have a breakfast meeting? The first Wednesday of the month.
It was council to accommodate for budget.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to come early and have breakfast with you.
Thanks, I would rather speak.
All right. So the meeting starts at 8 on Wednesday.
Oh, for Pete's sake, I'm glad you said that.
For you.
Oh, shush. What time do I actually have to be here?
If we're gonna have breakfast together, 8.
Oh my gosh.
9. We are done. Moved by Councillor Blatz, carried unanimously.
Good stuff.
Thank you, everyone.